Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics bringing you the week one review. And boy, oh boy, did we get a wild first week of action in the OUA. We're obviously going to go through all the games. We're going to start off with our players of the week. We have a special interview with one of our close friends talking about the OUAtv experiment now that we've gotten to see it. But none of that. Oh, and also we got a little mailbag section at the end because just love you all for sending in your thoughts and questions. So we're going to answer those and do the best we can if we haven't addressed them. Again, shout out to everyone sending us your thoughts and feedback. But none of that comes remotely close to happening unless I say, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
I am doing so well, my man. OUA football is back, and it is back better than ever. I think that's the most exciting week one I have ever seen across the OUA, with a quadruple overtime, with two 500-yard plus passers or 500 total yards of offense. Like, this was unbelievable. I am so excited and so happy about the future of the OUA, and especially this season. It's going to be a great one.
You know, a sort of general comment that will probably come up again when we talk about some of these games that I actually meant to bring it up in our conversations before, because Tom and I pretty much do a podcast before even recording the podcast, because once we start talking about all this stuff, as you can imagine, we get excited. But we talk about it all the time. And I think most people accept this within football, that offense takes more time than defenses. And we obviously saw some really explosive offenses, sometimes like really it's that Carlson game I'm thinking about with U of T, where, you know, like the offense is doing their thing, but the defense just felt like they were like, you know, golly, like give them a whole other week in training camp before they are able to like get out there doing their basics. It was an interesting thing. And in other games too, seeing just offenses really functional out the jump, while a couple defenses, and yes, one major example in particular, feeling like they were a bit behind the eight ball. That was something I was reflecting on this morning that goes against something that we often talk about. So maybe it's just an anomaly, but you know, partly too felt like a bit of a shorter training camp for these guys. Maybe that plays into it. I'm just curious as a general thought, whether it seems like that was a trend that compared to what we've seen in years past, you know, again, going back to like two great offenses in Laurier and Queens 11-10 final in their first week. I mean, Taylor Elgersma 2 years ago, not getting a touchdown until week 3, passing the ball and such. Did that seem to kind of ring true with you at all? That in contrast to what we normally see, offense seemed to be a bit ahead of where some defenses were?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of things to still clean up at times. The thing that I think most speaks out to me is in the first half to three quarters, even like Evan and what the Western offense seemed to be off on this, not on the same page. Like, he's throwing a post when the receiver's running a corner route and things of that nature. But I think when you look across the board, especially at the offenses that were doing really well, the amount of veterans that are back on each offense. I mean, you look at U of T's offensive secondary, Scott Barnett, Chris Joseph, Jake Oseen. Those are guys who have been on that program for a few years now and have that chemistry going back and forth. I know Laurier is obviously an outlier with Callum Wither, but the entirety of that receiving core all being back from that last year. Guelph in a very similar regard. Yes, you don't have Vachon, but Willem Arsenault, Tessier, are all of those guys that are still back there. So I think having a lot of those veteran players who have been in big games before, who have thrown in games before and gotten live bullets, is why we saw so many of these offenses perform way better than what we expect in offense in week one.
And part of it kind of now just feels like a lot of these teams, not to say in years past that teams aren't going to come out just guns ablaze and just swinging from the jump, but in some ways, and this is just sort of like, you know, calling it after the fact, or like reading into after the fact. So it doesn't mean that I went into the thought process, but it being like, man, we better come out swinging week one, because the fall behind the eight ball week one with the amount of talent across the OUA is a bad situation to be in. So if we're gonna, you know, we're gonna go down swinging if we're gonna try. But you know what? Great performances. We're going to get into all those games, but let's get into some of the individual days that were so spectacular. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, I'm sure y'all know at least what game and what team we're going into. But Tom, who are we handing the week one offensive player of the week to?
It's gotta be Scott
It's
Barnett,
got to be.
quarterback for the U of T Blues. 32 for 39, 567 yards passing, four touchdowns, no interceptions. Those are U of T records in a single game. He scored more touchdowns than I think he did on almost the entirety of last year in the passing game. The unbelievable offensive attack from U of T against Carleton was a sight to see, and Scott Barnett deserves all of that. And it's insane to think of when you think of all of the other incredible performances across the league, what Tristan Aboud did. I mean, Keegan Hall's got four touchdowns, two in the air, two on the ground as well, but none of them come close to the unbelievable performance that we saw from Scott Barnett.
It was awesome to see. And obviously, we're going to break down that game, go into detail. U of T folks, had things to say about our picks that we made and the tier that we put them in. We'll address that. And maybe just to contextualize it, both to talk about how incredible a day was, but then also maybe to pump the brakes a little bit as far as like maybe it's an anomaly, is that on this day, August 23rd, U of T scored one fewer passing touchdown than they did all of last year and amassed about 38% of their total passing yards. So, so I don't mean to be boomer bust about it to say that like it's not sustainable or anything like that. I would love to think it falls somewhere in the middle just of progress, right? You just want to see progress for all these clubs. So whether that like major jump in production is reflective of what they're going to be this year, I think you would be fooling yourself at U of T if you think that that is sustainable. But again, we'll go into but I don't want to take away from it. I just know that there were some U of T folks with pitchforks out at us and just being like, hey, come on. But great job by Barnett and that receiving core. Hard not to give it to just Chris Joseph alone for what he did with the 18 catches, 257, two touchdowns. Jake St. Thomas. What a great day for them. Can't wait to break that one down. But let's get our two other players of the week. On the defensive side of the ball, Tom, we're going to that 4 OT just barn burner. And who's taking the crown for week one defensive player of the week?
Yeah, it's frustrating because we don't have the full stats for it, and there's a few games where we don't have this. However, in keeping in the knowledge of it and obviously watching the game, our defensive player of the week this week goes to Oliver Jackson, defensive end for the Queens Golden Gales. Had a few tackles on the day, lots of pressures in the back end, but most importantly, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, and an interception on the day. Oliver Jackson did a hell of a job being in that Western backfield as often as he possibly could. So he gets our defensive player of the week.
And we obviously highlighted that defensive line being an area of concern for Queens, just purely looking at the players that they lost. And then to have Western come in, a team that you know was going to challenge them in the trenches with that big offensive line that they have and their penchant to want to run the ball. And so for Queens on the defensive line, for him to have that kind of day, Eric Johnson was having a good day there as well, is really positive for Queens defensively to know that you're already seeing signs of I don't want to say signs of life. That makes it seem like the bar was too low, but some really positive signs. And Oliver Jackson was someone that you highlighted as a possible name to keep an eye open for. So doubly good job by you. And Tom, we're not leaving this game for special teams player of the week. We're just flipping sidelines because when you go to 4 OTs, there's going to be a lot of kicking happening. So who's taking home week one special teams player of the week?
It's got to be our guy, old man Brian Garrity gets the special teams player of the week. I mean, you've got 5 for 5 on field goals, including being absolutely perfect in overtime and kicking an overtime winner in 4 OT. That's got to get you a special teams player of the week.
And you know what? Like, without seeing too much, like as far as early season, preseason predictions, if you were going to say what kicker is probably the who's going to be the most clutch, like Garrity has to be the guy. No one, obviously Michael Horvat in terms of just his accolades and what he's done in regular season games is terrific. He's a great kicker. Tyler Mullen for Queens is really solid. Really, Zachary Copeland in Ottawa, some really good kickers out there. But when you just look at it, and it would be a fun thing to do after the season, maybe we get Brian on the show to kind of talk about his career, just part of this legacy of just incredible place kickers for Western. you think about the games that he's been in, the high leverage kicks he's had to make. Was it 2 years ago? He was the Yates Cup MVP, right? This guy has ice in his veins. We didn't think he was coming back in large part because he's in his second year, I think, now at their Faculty of Education at Western, which means that in like a week from now, he's going to be in a classroom on top of still reporting to practice and still winning games, no doubt, with that incredible foot of his. Those are our players of the week. As always, let us know, who did you have taking home the hardware this week? What performances did you like, or shout outs nonetheless? Tom, we're going to get into the week one review, but before we do, we don't usually cut out of our normal production from the moment you hear us start talking to the moment we finish. That's everything we say. We don't cut, but we're going to cut momentarily just to bring in a conversation we had before we started recording this section of the podcast with our guy, the man in the chair, Dakota Vine, rocking it on the specials, used to be rocking the mic with me years back, about his experience checking in to week one solely through OUAtv. Tom and I give some of our thoughts on that as well. And then we'll be right back here when that conversation's finished up to hop into week one. So let's check out our conversation with our guy, Dakota Vine. Well, we are joined by our man in the chair, the meme god himself, bringing you all the takes, all the opinions on social media. And when things just tip the scales too much one way or the other, Dakota needs to make his appearance on the pod to speak his piece. Dakota Vine joining us live and direct. Dakota, what's on your mind, my friend? How are you doing, first and foremost? But what's on your mind that you needed to remove yourself from your behind the scenes role and come front and center to talk your talk?
Well, I appreciate you having me on the pod. It's always great to show my face, especially because I talk a lot of smack. So now people, again, guys, if you see a funny post or a mean post on Instagram, it's not Tom, it's not Zach, it's me. So come correct, and I'll stand on it. I'll hold L's when I need to, but I'll stand on it. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the fact that not me personally, but Tom's bank account's a little lighter, and I don't know if it's for any good. I know you guys were live and direct at multiple games, so you didn't really have to experience what a lot of us experienced, but OUATV's is we're doing an old school do better on that one.
I'll see if I still have that little sound clip that we'll throw in for it. But yeah, it's a Dakota do better. I mean, I certainly, having gone back after the games that Tom and I were live at to watch the other ones, I have some opinions about things that I felt during that experience, and just other people in the Canadian football community reaching out about their experience tuning in. So, but I'm sure Tom and I will talk about that a bit on the main part of the podcast, or we'll talk about it right now. But what is it that most caught your eye, your sort of ire, if you will, in watching?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like before I was very critical. I mean, just for being critical, but talking about people pronouncing names wrong and all that stuff. But we're gonna put that aside. Um, this wasn't worth free, let alone $90. And I guess for some people it's 40 for a specific sport, but we're big balling over here at the 55. So Tom dropped 90. I don't know if there's tax on that, maybe. I would say a big one for me that I found out, players don't get it for free. So if you're not traveling with the team, and there are lots of players that don't travel with the team, you don't get a watch. But don't worry. You can check the website. Tom, what quarter is the York game in right now that happened yesterday?
We are still in the first quarter with 7 minutes and 50 seconds left.
Yeah. I also was checking the Western game yesterday, and I believe it showed a score of 18-5 in the fourth quarter for Western. That score never happened. So no real live updates. You can't watch the game. You can't check. We can't check the box score the day after. But don't worry, if you tune in late, you'll be caught right up, because you definitely will know the time that is happening in the game. You will know the down and distance. They definitely have those on the little scorecard. Wait, no, sorry, that's also wrong. They don't have that. They might have the score. They might have the quarter. And when you are watching, if you're lucky, the camera people will zoom out and you can see the whole field and not just one specific player that doesn't have the ball, throwing the ball, or catching the ball. A lot of late zooms, a lot of late pans. It feels like I'm watching a high school football game from when I was in high school. And to date myself, despite my baby face, that was like 17, 18 years ago. It was bad.
Now,
Um, sorry, go ahead,
no,
please.
I want to jump in quickly because you're bringing up some really good points. And part of it, and I want to throw this to Tom quickly because when we were in the house at York yesterday, we got to meet some people on the production side of the York broadcast, and all super nice people. And as we know that the productions are run by the universities and by the students who are involved in those programs. And so I just wanted to kind of caveat and saying like, this is a tough spot that we're in because whether it's the actual football on the field or anything going around it, I think we try to do the best we can, assuming we aren't provoked to do so, of just not really trying to say negative things about the students, whether student athletes or students doing the production. But what's tough right now is the fact that when they add the cost to it, but then there's seemingly no upside or something you're getting for that. It's tough because you want to say all the things that you're saying, Dakota, and I think they're fair. And again, we've had people reaching out to us before week one of their worries that this was gonna be, well, something not great, possibly worse than it was, and whatever. But in trying to do it, where it's like being like, well, we're not trying to talk poor of those kids doing it, but like, where was the support knowing that they're now bringing in a fee for it? Because I mean, Tom, again, because Dakota brought some great points, and we talked about that piece when the individual reached out to us saying, I'm a scout team player and I either have to pay to watch my boys or wait for a rundown and then film. Like, it's a bad beat, but I don't want to make it about the kids themselves, but it's a tough spot.
It's a real tough spot. It's a real tough look. I mean, to have this as the stream quality initially last year, not great. And one of our biggest pet peeves in all of this is the way that our athletes are being marketed or lack thereof, which is a huge reason why there's not enough people watching this game and why we do what we do here. It's one thing to do that if it's free. When you put a paywall behind it, there's an expectation of a certain level of quality, especially when, like we've detailed previously, it's a very similar pay amount to Can West, and Can West streams are damn near on par with TSN. That I have no problem paying the $40 to $80 or whatever it is for that. I have no problem with that. If you're asking me to pay the exact same for OUA and for the AUS, I better see that kind of quality. And we're not right now. And I understand this is the first year. It's going to take some time and all that stuff. But if it's going to take time, then you charge $5 or you charge $10 and then build up to it. You can't just charge $40 and not have anything new happen.
Yeah, no. You guys are way too nice, and I'm not here to make fun of students that are doing production stuff at all. But OUA, we'll call them the cloaked people and that govern the OUA. And I'm sorry that this is going to ruin any brand attempts that we've been trying to do, but they've already partnered with the unspeakable. So they're all sitting in a room and they're watching Can West of last year, and they're saying, "Yeah, okay, they charged, people got it, let's charge." And then there's one guy in the corner going, "Well, are we gonna do the same production value?" And then the guy's like, "Yeah, we're gonna charge $80." Well, are we gonna change anything? Yeah, we're gonna charge $80. Well, where's that money gonna go? Like, is it gonna improve things? Yeah, we're gonna charge $80. There's no plan. You can't just put a paywall and be like, we'll come up with a plan afterwards. We're gonna step one, money. Step two, profit. Step three, question mark. There's no plan here. And again, yes, some schools like Queens does a great job. I think
Mhm.
Guelph does a great job. York has always kind of struggled a little bit. I also know it's a new stadium. They only have like two cameras. You do what you can do. Please stop zooming in, York. Please stop zooming in. That's all. That's what I'm going to say about just your production quality. But there is no plan. They just put up a paywall and said, we're going to charge you. We're not going to do anything different. It's like when the TTC raises its prices, and you're like, why? It's not getting better.
So let's try to finish this on, and I think I don't know if you have any more takes from your experience watching it, and if so, please share. And I'll throw this to both of you as well, because the one thing that occurred to me is with the Can West model, this piece that I think really stuck out when it came to our attention yesterday of guys who aren't traveling with the team. How do you make sure that as someone speaking for myself, and I think we all been in similar positions, having to be on that scout team, like you'd want to say, hey, look, as much as like there, whatever you want to talk about, hierarchies on a team, this, that, and the third, if you don't, the way I think you treat your scout team as a team is so indicative of just like how you go about doing things as a whole organization. But Can West clearly has been doing this paid model. So I'm curious, like we love how they're doing it and the production's really good. So are the scout team players there just being like, yeah, I got to pay to watch my guys, but like it's great production, so I don't mind. Not necessarily knowing the answer to that, let's at least just, and I'll start with Tom, and then we can finish with Dakota because I know you don't have too much time. But to be able to say, like, okay, what would the best version of this model be, taking into account both the fact that we want better production for the dollars, and then also what should be done about non-travel players? Because I don't think they should have to pay a thing, even if it's the best television broadcast that you could get, irrespective of whatever. I don't think those kids should have to pay. So, Tom, and we talked about a bit of this yesterday as well. Just what do you think the improved model needs to be, and how do we deal with the fact that one way or the other, when there is money involved, it raises a question about the scout team players?
Well, to be honest with you, when I was on the scout team myself in my first couple years at Mac, or during some of my times there, anyways, we didn't have a big plan in terms of how we would watch the team if you weren't traveling, because the games were already on cable, at least in the first few years when I was there. So you pop on cable 14, you pop on the score in my first couple of years, and oftentimes you'd be able to see the guys play, and you're kind of up to there. Now, in the situation that we're in, even last year, it's a free stream, you have to deal with ads, whatever, but you're watching the boys play, whatever. Now, what I think would be really great is you give each team their own login that they're able to use, and no worries about paying or whatever else. And then you make, here's a team bonding session. Hey, everybody who wants to watch the game, come into the locker room, come into this shared space at the university and watch it with everybody. Here's our free stream, whatever. I think that's the best case that you could do with something like this, even though the ultimate thing that you should be doing is anybody who actually plays on the team should not have to pay to watch all of this. But in the essence of being as realistic as possible, I think that would be the best opportunity here. Get one for the entire team, have everybody come into the locker, into a shared space, or at somebody's house, whatever, and watch the game as a team.
Dakota,
That's such
what
a
would you
nice.
put your marketing hat on? I think you're wearing your marketing hat, or that's a Dodgers hat. It's likely a Dodgers hat if I were to be a betting man. What
It is, and it's the hat that I wear at work. So
let's be solutions oriented if we can for both of these issues, as far as the actual product that is on the streams and the piece on the scout team players as well. What's your take?
I think Tom had a fantastic answer. I don't think that you should charge students to watch. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I do kind of now understand why some of those Mac players didn't like the memes that we posted, because they must have just paid $40 and us chirp them. So that makes sense. Um, no, it's got to be. I mean, I think at bare minimum, Tom's idea of having like a login for the team. But I think the players should have access to the game. I mean, give them, what is it, Game Strat? I think they should have access to that too. But I know that the capabilities of, broadcasting from Queens back home to London, Ontario on a Game Strat isn't going to work. I think it's ridiculous to make students that are on the team pay to watch. I think it's ridiculous to make people pay to watch the quality of the streams that are there. Um, I will also say that, is there an app for this? Am I just really dumb? Okay, because I was watching on the just Safari app on my phone, and I couldn't full screen the game. It just wouldn't let me. It's there's I feel like there's no thought that was put into this plan. Again, I made a joke about it, but there was no thought put into this plan. It was just, we're gonna put a paywall here. There's no transparency on where this money is going. At all. It's just, and also $80 for the three sports. I know we only did that because I think we can save clips, so we can do stuff with it. But even $40 for just the one sport, I think is way too much for 8 games. No, you're not offering quality product. The quality product is at the stadium, which you guys saw by think it's $5 a ticket. So I could go and watch all my home. If I'm a York Lions fan, I can go and watch every single York Lions game at York for cheaper than a terrible stream. That is not worth my time. So no, student athletes shouldn't have to pay. And if we have to pay, you got to make the product better. And I understand that it's student run, but there needs to be some guidelines. And if we're paying money, then that money needs to go back into the programs to make it a standardized kind of production quality stream for every single school. And yes, some schools can be better than others, but there needs to be a baseline a lot higher than what it is right now.
Well, and I wonder too, because I know with the CFL, they have that media training collaboration with TSN where players currently in the league get to, kind of wet their beak, if you will, in sort of what it would be like to enter the ranks of media and so on and so forth. And I know it's unrealistic to think that anything akin to that could happen, to have legitimate sports media companies partner with the OUA and with the schools. I mean, that would just solve all these problems to begin with. And I am a fan of it being student generated and having, from that standpoint, obviously, when you bring in someone like TSN, Sportsnet, whoever it is, you're going to get that. I do like the idea of it being student generated, but then at least bring people in to be able to like give them the reps and teach them how to operate it. Last thing I'll just say on it super quick that was really grinding my gears is after Tom and I spent a full day out and about checking out games, we got to watch the ones we missed and we pay for it so we can watch on demand. And the fact that you can't, and literally up to this year, you could, in the past, you could just scroll forward like 5-10 seconds with your arrow key, which for a game like football, where there's so much time in between plays, and I need to watch 3 plays after being out the whole day at games live and checking it out and losing my voice because Guelph and Laurier and all sorts of stuff going on that made me emotional, and Tom was there for it to support me. That again, I'm not to say I don't want to watch the whole games, but if you're actually trying to watch every game, come on, bring back that feature, please, please, for the people trying to bring you free coverage of your sport, just do that for us.
Yeah, one last thing, or I guess two last things before I go, and I swear they're not bad jokes. I'll save that for later. One, I'm 100% on board with you about not bringing TSN, and I love the fact that it's student driven. I don't actually enjoy when OUA gets later into the year and they start replacing regular coverage with people that don't know the game. They get their Sparks notes from probably the people that did the play-by-play before, and they're like, insert name here has had quite a season and it has inserted stats here and is doing inserted stats, and I predict them they will do this inserted stats. That's I think that really takes away from it. My baseline for production is let me know the down and distance and the time. And if there's any schools that need to understand how to build one of those units and put it on your production, I'll do that for you for free. Please. I going watching the game as long as it's not at the start, or going back and looking for clips based off the box score that hasn't loaded yet and trying to just get a clip of a touchdown that's somewhere in this quarter. I don't want to watch 3 hours of football for one clip. It's a nightmare. Let me know not even down distance. Just let me know how much time is left in the quarter or what quarter it is. There's sometimes in that UFT Carleton game, there was just no scoreboard. There was nothing. There was no ticker. There was nothing.
Now that could have been just a little home cooking by Carlton of being like, if we don't put the score up, nobody will know. He is our man in the chair, behind the scenes, the meme god himself, Dakota Vine. Dakota, always a pleasure getting your face and your voice on the pod and on the videos. Be kind to yourself, my friend.
Kind to yourself. And if you're going to come for Tom, come for me. Stand on that. Peace.
Peace. Once again, that was our conversation with our boy Dakota Vine, giving you our thoughts on the OUAtv experience week 1. Let us know, how did you find watching those games? How do you think that this product could improve, should improve, everything and anything within that conversation? We know you've had your thoughts leading into week 1 with the preseason, and let's keep this conversation going. But with no further ado, let's jump into the week 1 action, starting with the game. We were live and direct from York Lions Stadium, where your McMaster Marauders, Tom, fell just short to these new York Lions. Final score in this one, the York Lions 31, the McMaster Marauders 24. The game literally ending, well, just about ending, with Mac on York's doorstep trying to punch it in to tie up the game. York shuts the door. don't quite get to kneel it out, but sneak their way out of there with the first win of their season. The Keegan Hall era, though I don't know how long an era will be, has begun. And boy, oh boy, was that special. Tom, first impressions from this game. We were live in the house. We were treated so nicely by the folks at York, showing us like their VIP section, their press boxes, all these types of things, getting to be on the field, to the game itself. What are your first impressions from this game before we dive into the nitty gritty of what we actually saw?
Two main points. One, holy crap, Keegan Hall is good at football. The way that he commanded the entire offense. For those of you who didn't watch the game, it's a hurry up style offense where he is calling essentially his own plays. He's obviously got the headset as well, so he's listening to his offensive coordinator, as he calls them, but he's making adjustments on the field. And not only that, but like the folks down in the US do, he's also calling the protections for the offensive line, meaning he's seeing the entire defense. He knows or he sees, hey, this is what coverage I'm seeing, or this is what blitz I'm seeing. This is the slide protection that I want. Unbelievable work by Keegan Hall, and we'll get into that. And the second piece, this McMaster team is a whole lot better than you and I thought they were going to be going into this year. I saw some really great stuff, offense, defense, and special teams. Albeit you come up a bit short, we'll go into it, but I'm really excited for what this Mac squad has.
I think I was saying it to a few folks, including Adam Grandy afterwards, who like great start to his career being a defensive coordinator at Mac. Because I think it was going to the point I said of being like, because he came out to say, hey, we tried to prove you wrong, which, hey, I love that they're listening to the podcast and know we had him in the prove us wrong territory. And frankly, like, without seeing anything else on the season, that game alone proved us wrong because, frankly, Mac's floor was much higher than I had thought that it was going to be for this year. And again, I know I'm branded as the number one Mac hater. I think I'm generally fair on how they're actually performing because I said it when we talked about them in that Tier D podcast that I actually like what this could look like in a year from now when they figure out that quarterback piece. They get that offensive line that much more veteran. And just all these things, Jackson Taylor, that much more year veteran, and so on and so forth. Grandy's defense taking another step forward. Coach Hopkins' offense really getting to take hold there. And off the jump, they were looking really, really strong. And so let's talk. You know what? Frankly, I want to talk about. We'll talk about Keegan, but we knew he was going to be incredible going in. I didn't quite know that we were in store for what we actually saw. Like, the dude is a maestro up there in terms of directing literally everyone on that offense. I don't think I've ever seen at the OUA level a quarterback calling out protections like that on every play. It's remarkable. The dude is playing Madden out there, and it's fantastic. But I want to talk about the day we saw from LT, Luke Thalman, because man, oh man, did he look sharp in there. And again, we don't have the full stats in front of us, which is unfortunate, but he looked so confident in there, in large part, I think, because the running game was as consistent as we've seen in a few years. So it was in a strange way, you lose, obviously, your best player in Keegan, but the offense as a whole in some way actually looked better than it was at times last year. And partly, again, Coach Hopkins year 2 now, more settled in. And that piece that you brought up earlier on where, when you have Keegan, you're not going to really develop your run game as much as you might have to otherwise because you're in the business of winning games. And winning games means have the ball in Keegan's hands as much as you can. That running game looked good. LT looked confident back there. He's making throws. These are your Marauders, Tom, no matter what. And I'm gonna make some comments about, the comments made about you briefly, but still your Marauders. You must have been, and I say that knowing that you were, satisfied with the performance they put out on this day.
Completely. I was so happy to see the development of this team across the board. I think when you look at that offensive line, and like I had mentioned previously, I was excited about the development there. To have a second-year player at center, Adam Woods, be nominated as one of the captains on that team, to me is a great sign of what the future has to come here. But seeing Christian Cote, Frank Vrugdenhill, Quinn Cassidy, those guys out on that offensive line played great. They gave Thalman enough time to get the ball off, and the run game was there. Seeing Braden Kelly and Micah Duchesne going off the edge and gaining some big yards and chunks at the time. was phenomenal to see. And it's not like York doesn't have great guys on that defense. I mean, Brody Clark alone was up there, albeit he looks like he went down with an injury. And when we specifically asked Brody Clark and the trainer, they blatantly looked at me dead in the face and then didn't say anything as he went off on crutches. So I got to assume that that guy's got some injuries going on. But I was really, really happy with the entirety of that McMaster offense. And also, just as a quick aside, because I want to make sure that everybody knows it, oh my God, is Nathan Denkers a big boy?
Yeah, holy smoke. Well, it was funny because I didn't realize he actually was listed as a tight end. I just thought he's like, all right, he's a big receiver. And when I saw him out there, I don't remember what it was, but he capped the end on a outside run play to his side, and I don't know who the defender was from York, but the guy, once Dankers got his hands on him, was toast. That dude looks like a fitness model out there in a McMaster jersey. He was phenomenal. The whole thing was running really efficiently all game long, and they put themselves in a position to win the game, and that's all you can really ask for. That's going to be a theme in so many, in at least 3 of these games where you say, like, you're walking out, where losing teams are walking out being like, it hurts that we didn't pick up the dub, but we know we can play with that team. Having said that, we were talking with folks at the game, and and I think this will bring us back to the York offense side of things, and then by virtue of that, we can talk about Grandy's defense because they had a really good day. Was that and this actually reflects some of the comments that we got that we'll say for the mailbag section about how matchups might fare differently between teams not being in week 1. And the specific sort of context of that in this game was that this York offense, and I really hate that we don't have the stats because we kept saying it all game long that, like, let's say Keegan went 30 for 40. I don't know, right? But just assume there was 10 missed balls. 8 or 9 of those, like 2 of those are actually on him.
Yeah.
And that's not even to say his receivers were playing poorly by any means. There was a couple awesome matchups towards the end of the game, and we were on the field in the end zone where Avery Ford
going up against Sean Underhill.
Oh my goodness. What a matchup that was. But even on the balls that weren't coming down, it was like a great matchup by the defender. Keegan put the ball in the only place that his guys could make a play on it. And sometimes it just felt like the receiver was surprised, like when they would stop that one ball that we saw of like a fade to the field side. And the receiver was almost confused that, like, oh my gosh, this is actually a back shoulder fade here. They stopped running. Like, and I wish I had the numbers, but Keegan was making these plays that just you could almost feel York wasn't entirely ready for. So going back to that point of Mac's floor is definitely higher than we realized. And I really like that because no matter what I say about my love or lack thereof for Mac, I want to see more teams playing good football in the OUA. But York's ceiling offensively is frankly possibly higher than I envisioned it being with the style of offense they're doing and giving Keegan the reins to just make the calls and read the defense live on the field. Tom, it was incredible to see what he was doing, and this offense can certainly can undoubtedly still improve by magnitudes more.
Yeah, I don't think I walked into this and I watched the game and I was thinking as we were watching it, wow, did I really not take into consideration how good some of these York receivers are and things? And I think that I didn't truly understand that or give them their credit for sure. But I think another big part of that is that they have gotten better because of Keegan. And putting balls in certain places where they can only catch and allowing them to be athletes elevates the level of play that your receivers can do. I mean, Avery Ford, we knew was an outstanding receiver, but seeing what he was able to do, I mean, we were on the field, there was a corner route close to us, and he's eyes up in the air, tracks it, brings it down, toe taps before going out of bounds, and you going, that's an elite level catch. But it's also because of an elite level throw that Keegan was able to give to him. So he elevates the entire potential of that offense, and it's why they look so impressive. They were a little bit slow out the gates here because it's a lot of moving parts all at once. When you're only going hurry up, there's no time for you to get into a spot. And surely if you're in hurry up, and you and I can attest to how many plays and how many different variations on passing routes you would have, if all of those are now just audibles that are going back and forth, that's a lot of things to remember at a certain time. And you've got guys who are going all over the place. We saw empty looks where you've got either Malcolm Alunga or Avante McCoy out of the backfield, and then that changes. I'm no longer the most inside receiver. I'm bumped out to another one, so that changes the route that I have. There's so many different variations on what can happen there. So I saw a little bit of confusion, at least at the start, but near the back end, and as that game went on, that offense only seemed to click more and more as things were going. It was really impressive to watch. But what I will say, and I do think that this York offense is amazing, that McMaster defense impressed the hell out of me. Sam linebacker, number 5, Isaiah Shields, who's made the switch over to defense, played a phenomenal game and had a great time of tracking his guy, getting into the backfield at times, and just disrupting things as they were happening. With no Mitch Price, I was really concerned about what that run game was going to look like. But with linebackers like Aaron Lavers and Anthony Sestanovic coming in, getting sacks as well off the blitzes, I'm really, really excited about this McMaster defense. I think they played lights out. And I said this to you, I can't believe I forgot to say it on the McMaster preview pod as we came in, but it's a first-year player, boundary half, number 2, Zach Payne. Watch out for that young man, because as his career goes on at McMaster, he's going to be an unbelievable player. I'll call it right now.
And what a great name for really any football player, but a defensive player, especially bringing the pain. It writes itself. No, they really were impressive. And as you mentioned in talking about Mitch Price and the concern you had when he wasn't there, let's bring it back to the run game of it all. And, not having the stats makes it a little difficult. This was one of the aspects that you and I were kind of, going back and forth on, the most was, Melkus is the RB1, but Avante doesn't start. Avante McCoy doesn't start in their base package, which is immensely surprising because he's, your all gadget type guy who can do it all for you. And he did go down late with injury. When we talked to him, he seemed to indicate it was just a calf strain, but obviously as a offensive player, that can be huge, take you out of a game late in it. So hopefully he's back in action and it doesn't hamper his season much at all. But I'm just you just got to get him on the field a bit more, was my impression early on. I guess in some way, the fair way of looking at it is saying, we know Avante's amazing. We haven't been there in camp or what's been going on in summer. So if guys were beating him out for positions, that just speaks more so to the amount of depth they have to be able to say, well, we can now rotate Avante in these key spots and use them sparingly, which, again, I'm biased because I love the kid. He's a great football player and a super awesome young man. I want to see him have the most opportunities for success. But just in terms of the totality of that offense, it just makes it that much more of that spoils of riches that is, again, exciting to see how they, fine tune and refine that offense. And the last thing I'll say there too, really nice seeing CJ Vincent finally for York after don't think he played the entirety of last year, but we saw him at the regional combine, so obviously knew that he was of some repute based on what he did in the CGFL. And just man, oh man, whether it's his skills on their own, but also as a product of the talent around him to, as we talk about, then ease the burden of, can you double cover him if he's that good? Is he going to be in single coverage looks? And then with Keegan drawing it up every which way he wants to, he's someone who I'm really excited to see how he progresses with this offense. Tom, what are the thoughts you have about this game that we were at yesterday?
Well, the other side of the ball here for York in that defense, once again, very impressed with Brody Clark. He goes down with an injury. Don't know what his status is. The fact that nobody said anything to us when we asked them directly makes me think that it was something a little worse for Ware. He may not be back at least next week, but we'll have to see. But defensive lineman Jaden Dix out of Ole Miss, a transfer coming in. He's listed at 6'5", 255, and he looked all of that. He looked really impressive there. The other side of this as well that we need to speak on, and that really surprised us, no Peyton Ryder. Not listed on the roster, not numbered, not anywhere. So it looks like he is no longer a part of these York Lions. We don't know any details from there, but new middle linebacker Number 45, Austin Daisy, had a great game as well. He is a run stopper first and foremost, went in, filled gaps as quickly as he could, and was great in his debut in that end. So, really excited about what that looks like. I am going to say, really fantastic that McMaster is able to run the ball. It's interesting to look at with a Greg Knox defense, where typically that is a very difficult thing to do. And if Brody Clark, your star player on defense, is out, having to try to replace him, and what does that mean on that side is I'm I'm confident in the York offense. I think that's going to be outstanding no matter what. That special teams was able to come out with a couple plays, including a blocked field goal. And if not for a couple field goals that didn't happen, that could be a different game as well. But this defense, I'm still looking to see how well it's going to come together and how well you're going to be able to play against some of the big guys. When you're playing against a Western or a Queens that loves to run the ball and loves to run power and has these elite level running backs, how well are you going to be able to stand up against that? And so that's my big question about this York game, or this York defense. And the last thing that I want to say here, just before I allow you to say your piece here as well, have to, when you lose a game by one touchdown or a few points, you overanalyze every single decision for sure. I have to question first quarter, you're on the 35-yard line of York, and you elect to punt the ball rather than trying to go for the field goal. And we absolutely know Michael Horvat's a phenomenal field goal kicker, and that's certainly within his range. And then a little bit later on, you get a chance, you're in a very similar spot, and you do go for the field goal, and then that's blocked. And you leave a potential 6 points off the board. And when you only lose by 7, and now instead of driving the length of the field to try to score a touchdown, you only have to get to Horvat's range, which is damn near the entire half of the field. That changes the dynamic of things here. So a couple of interesting special teams situations, I guess, led to that in the end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and you could see Horvat was frustrated, to say the least, coming off the field on what ended up being a punt, and frankly, not a great punt either when they decided not to go for that field goal early on. So I don't know if that was just him being upset with the punt or with the call by Coach Potasic. But either way, yeah, in close games like that, and we can kind of make a similar comment when we get to the Guelph Laurier game, that in a competitive game, when you know that you're playing someone that you feel like you can beat, leaving points on the board is a tough thing. I'll sort of finish the conversation with the just in general before we move on to our next game with, saying that, with Brody Clark, my hope of hopes is that next week when this team's in Ottawa, he's out there fresh as a daisy, 28's in your program and on the field. We did see last year though he's listed as a DB, but Kirill Nyari, who filled in when Brody was hurt last year. I didn't take note of whether he was on the field as a starter at another position in that defensive secondary, but I do recall him filling in for Brody last year. So knowing that you have a guy like that who's had experience in Knox's defense, even if it's maybe, again, we don't know anything about this injury, and we're hoping 28 is on the field next week, but even if it's just a couple weeks, I feel like they have a guy in there who can try to hold down the fort for a little bit, but we'll see what comes of it. As I mentioned, York are going to take their talents on the road to take on the Ottawa GGs next week. 4:00 start from Ottawa, and Mac is going to be starting their home campaign as they host the Queens Golden Gales from Ron Joyce at 1 p.m. A game I'm pretty certain we're going to be in the house for. Got to check out our boys Nez and Taggart coming in from Queens, and your guy, possible future President's Trophy Award winner, Justin Pace. And what an exciting game they had. So why don't we talk about that game the Queens Golden Gales had? Because they were playing host to their arch nemesis, the Western Mustangs, and they fell so short on this one. Final score, golly, Tom, what was the final score? Because I made the mistake. Egg on my face, my friend. I made the mistake of opening the box score from the U Sports website, thinking that it would give me the information I needed to effectively relay what had gone on in this game beyond my own notes. Shame on me. I should have known better. Tom, what the heck was the final score after 4 overtimes in this one?
Final in this one, Western 45, Queens 42.
Man, oh man, as we said, when you have a final like that, 4 OTs in, it's hard to not recognize the kicker on the winning team for their performance in that one. And Brian Garrity was spot on throughout the day. This game felt so reminiscent. And I think, again, it's fun when the games finish up and we're reaching out to folks and folks are reaching out to us. A different ending, but so reminiscent of 2 years ago from Richardson Stadium. The Evan Hillock to Savon Magne Jones, the STM connection, literally as time expires, the legendary call heard around the world by our guy on the radio broadcast there. And you reached out to him, and I apologize, I don't remember his name off the top of my head. Jesse Bell, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Let's start there because, golly, Queens hasn't beat this team in over a decade now, almost 2 decades at this point. I think we still need to call it a rivalry just because of the history. But man, oh man, it keeps happening to Queens at home against this team. It's one thing to lose them in 2/8 cups at the start of the year, but now adding on these losses here.
Yeah, it's got to be heartbreaking. And Jesse Bell actually sent us a screen grab of his stream, and he's got his head down, buried in his arm, and just no outstanding call or dramatic call here, just me slowly dying inside because of this. And I said to him on Insta, well, we were said to him on social media, and I'll say it to here again. Man, we don't mean to laugh at you. We're laughing with you, but this is an incredible take and just a heartbreaking scenario here for these Golden Gales. I mean, anytime, and listen, unbelievable job by Western, and we'll get into this here, but I just want to air a grievance here. Queens, it's 26-10 with 2 minutes and change left in the fourth quarter. If there was ever a time where you had Western where you want them, you have to close the door, man. You had it in the same scenario 2 years ago with that Savon Magne Jones touchdown. But this is 16 points that you allowed Western to get back into here. I know you're feeling the same level of frustration, but man, close that door.
It's tough too because I guess I don't remember the exact time when it occurred. I guess leading into the second to last touchdown by Hillock. So around the 2:20 mark where Queens has the ball and they get a 3rd and short. They go for it. They're unsuccessful. And, I don't want to just sound like the guy who's playing it based on the results, because if they get that, and there's all the reason in the world to think, because I didn't know that Jazz Cairo was going to be back for them. So man, oh man, they might have the best tackle combo with Jazz Cairo and Nicholas Henning on either side of that offensive line, and they have some great running backs, as we know, and a guy, Ethan Dahl, who was really looking special on that day. So on the one hand, you play that moment over 10 times. I think it's likely more often than not they convert on that, and especially where we're talking about Western up front with, Riley McLeod getting signed late into the summer, them having to fix that. Learning yesterday, actually, at the Guelph Laurier game, Malcolm Frazier transferred out of the program to UBC. So another hit to that defensive line, that front seven in general. I don't hate it by Queens. And it's just like, it's that much more frustrating to think that was them being like, yeah, we are going to close the door here. We get this first down. It's over. I don't really want to be overly critical about it, because I don't see how, if you're Queens, you come out of this one. This is going to sound very much what I'm going to say about Guelph when we get to that game later on, is that like you were at home and you didn't quite do it, and that sucks. And this is why we said that those 4 teams are essentially good enough to beat one another, but there's a difference between the teams that have proven it and the teams that need to prove it still in Guelph and in Queens. And guess what? Even home, they came up short, but still, we'll leave the Guelph part of it aside for now. You have to be happy if you're Queens coming into this game. It sucks that you didn't get it done to pick it up at home, to break that streak, and just all that comes with that in an 8-game season with these 11 strong teams. But I don't see how you're anything but happy coming out of this one. Vrikin was looking good in there. It clearly is his job. We saw him with a touch of an injury scare at the end of the first half, and I was just, not that I thought it was going to derail their whole season, because we love what we saw from Anthony Leo, and thought that could have been a competition piece for this year, and who knows what was going on in camp. But just for the kid himself and Vrikin, because like, golly, he's had so many injuries. But For Queens, and I guess we'll just start there. Like, you have to be happy about the performance on the day, even though it just irks you that you were right close to it again, and you couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that Queens responded in key scenarios is what really I'm excited about here. I mean, Westerns gets the ball to start the game. They drive the entire length of the field and score. And then soon afterwards, Queens does the same thing. And then they respond and they're driving the ball down the field and they're doing like there was no quit from this team whatsoever here. Even when at the very end of the game, Western scores and they get back into that 26 to tie it up. And then Brian Garrity kicks the field goal, and there's like 30 or 40 seconds left in the fourth quarter. Queens gets the ball back. Two massive plays. Alex Freakin, especially finding Nathan Falcone to eventually set up with the dying seconds a field goal to send us into overtime. There was just such a level of fight to this Queen squad, not backing down whatsoever. The grit was there, and I love to see that. Even probably my most favorite sequence of events, I think it's the third overtime. It's a key scenario here. It's first and 10, and Max von Muhldorfer, after having a great game, comes up with one of his most clutch plays where, like I mentioned in that preview pod, gets the offensive lineman going one way, hooks the arm and does the forklift, completely gets him out of the way and sacks Alex Freakin in a major offense, like it's OT here. The very next play, Freakin finds Kasari to gain most of that yardage back. And then on 3rd and 4, from his own 20-yard line or so, Freakin steps back and he's looking. He can't find anybody. So what does he do? He takes off and runs with it and gets into the end zone for a touchdown, takes his helmet off and yells and screams to say, I'm that guy. I'm the Queen's QB1 here. I love that entire sequence, because our guy, Max von Muhldorfer, doing his thing, but the immediate response, nobody hesitates, nobody's scared, nobody starts freaking out, despite the fact that it's an overtime scenario. You go right back to work and you respond. And now, yes, unfortunately, things didn't work out for you, and we'll get into the end of the game and what happened there, along with some photo evidence and all of that. But the response back and the fight that was on this Queens team, like, I loved every second of that, man.
No doubt. I mean, on Max quickly, he's probably, without putting too much thought into it, the best interior D lineman that we have in the league this year. And as good as Henning and Cairo were looking, there were times, and I don't even think it's to take a shot at the interior guys for that Queens O-line, but where you could tell that they were struggling. And I mean, how can you not with 55 there in the middle and just all those things that you were saying about him? It was great seeing Freakin. Honestly, just so happy for him based on what happened last year. Obviously, we saw him at East West, and he was looking really sharp there as well. Let's flip the script. You talked about Western marching the ball downfield, that opening drive, Ethan Dolby getting it started with that touchdown and looking like that run game, it just hadn't skipped a beat. And Evan early on was looking okay, but was shaky throughout. And culminating in late in the game, I think while it was still in regulation, they bring in Jerome Rancourt for a sneak, and then he doesn't go anywhere. Now, you got some information about the nature of that going on, what was going on there. But let's talk about Evan, the Western offense. But what was it that you were able to learn after all the fun and had settled down?
So interesting to look at it. And like we mentioned previously, like for the first three quarters, there was a lot of throws that seemed to be just off base from what we typically have seen Evan being on the same page with a lot of his receivers. Like even something like somebody went to curl inside and Evan thought that he was going to hook outside, so he threw the ball a few yards to the opposite way, and which is very uncharacteristic, but still obviously was able to find his guys and everything. In the fourth quarter, with about 4 or 5 minutes left, Evan takes off and runs in the Queens end zone, and he gets tackled from behind. He dislocates his shoulder. And so Jerome Rancourt comes in, and they're able to punch in the ball. And what happens? Evan comes back out onto the field, and he throws and converts the 2-point convert. And then Queens gets the ball. Evan comes back out onto the field for that next drive, including and once again, we don't have the stats in front of us, but I'm fairly certain a 40 to 50-yard bomb to Brady Masseri to get him into range. Jerome Rancourt comes back in, they score another touchdown, and Evan comes back, and they get the 2-point convert again on one shoulder before eventually taking him out and letting Jerome finish the game and all ultimately winning here. But like, there's a lot of people who have a lot of things to say about Evan for sure. You know, he's not that guy, he's this and that, whatever. And there's a lot of debate going on there. You cannot debate his toughness to come back in against a Queens defense that would love to take his head off on a dislocated shoulder and coming through with three of the biggest plays of the game to seal the overtime for them and help them get into what ultimately was a game-winning field goal in 4 OT.
Yeah, the heart of that kid is unmeasurable. I'm so curious to see what happens next week. Just the extent of this injury. I feel for the guy, man. I just, the kind of keeping it under wraps that he'd been dealing with arm injuries for the last year and change, and that he thinks he's coming back fully healthy, ready to prove so many of those naysayers wrong. And we talk about it all the time that when you're a Western quarterback, you are going to receive probably more scrutiny than any other specific positional player on any team in the OUA and maybe in all of U Sports. And I know Evan knew that going into it. I'm sure all these guys do. And yet you don't want to be that guy being like, well, I dislocated my shoulder. My elbow was messed up for a year, because guess what? That's more fuel to the fodder of those to idiots online who want to say whatever, So I just feel so bad, because one way or the other, I guess if it does become the fact that he just is able to, whether it's next week or just at some point, kind of put this behind him in terms of it's affecting his play, if that's even possible, who knows? It could just make for that much greater a story if he is still able to piece together an effective to a sort of above average, what we would expect from Evan Hillock type of season. But regardless of, what his status is, we know that even if he's his peak type of game, we know that it's for Western to go where they need to, because they showed it to us early on throughout the game. The run is still first and foremost what they're going to do, and they were effective on this game as we expected, with Ethan Dolby being the guy, Jack Kelly getting a couple of reps behind him as well. What'd you make of this run game? The first time we're seeing it in OUA action in the season, that is, with Dolby as the guy. What were you thinking watching this? And an O-line that got some pieces back, lost a couple guys, and an O-line that we were saying, hey, healthy is as good an O-line for Western that we've seen in recent years as well.
Yeah, I love this run game. I think Ethan Dolby really proved to me that he is RB1 in this. He had some really outstanding runs, bouncing off of tacklers and just driving his legs and driving his feet. But once again, the guy that I had mentioned on that preview, Jack Kelly, was a very integral part of this Western offense as well. Second-year player, running hard and continually fighting through tackles. And once again, this Queen squad is known for solid tackles and outstanding defense, led by one of the great defensive coordinators in Ryan McManus. Like, this was a great showing of a Western run game that's always going to be prevalent here, but continuing that level of, we're going to rely on this. Even you have Jerome Rancourt, who comes in there for a lot of those games and for the short yardage stuff where 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a run, and still they're able to get a lot of really good things there. It's a zone read, sure, but giving the ball off, they're still able to gain some yardage, albeit they're at certain times, at key times, especially in those overtime moments. Queens does a hell of a job, and I wanted to highlight one man in particular, number 49, Jalen Grabble. I believe he played will linebacker for the Queens Gales. He blitzed through a few times, tackled some guys in the backfield. I really loved what I saw from him as well. But this Western run game looks to be just right back to where it was.
Yeah, I thought they were looking spectacular. Ethan was running really smooth behind that O-line. Really excited to see what they're going to look like. I want to talk about the defense for Western for a bit. We obviously, got to see the debut of Jackson McKay, and he was looking solid back there. We got to see Ethan Martin, his first game for the Mustangs, his return to Richardson Stadium. And there was part of me where, when it looked like Queens was winning this, I'm like, Man, is Ethan just always going to be on the losing side of these matchups? And I'm happy for him that it didn't fare that way. And he had a really clutch pass breakup late in the game that kept Western in the game. Again, we talked about what Von Muhldorfer was doing. Soren Hallschmidt, the veteran on the D line, was looking good. Connor Franzese was looking really good there. But a weird stretch of plays or a weird moment, third, fourth quarter, by our guy in Richard Adu before that, like darn near, and he's he's made man status. You know what I mean at Western, just like what he's been able to do in his career thus far with that defense and on all those championship teams that he's been a part of, that he's been an integral part of. And there's part of me being like, this is going to be an interesting litmus test after he picks up two back-to-back objectionable conduct penalties, putting Queens on the doorstep to score. I forget which touchdown it was for them, but I think it was a touchdown that made it the 18-point lead or whatever it was. And of an interesting litmus test of being able to say, Greg Marshall's not one to hold back on who he chews out, even if that individual is his own son at times, when we know from years past. And we saw Adu before stay in the game, which in part was probably just, shoot, he's still our best option to win this one. That was a very odd moment. And again, I don't know the details of what was happening exactly. And then it became him, kind of chirping with the Queens bench, which is, to all the kids out there, not a good idea. But, that was weird. I don't know if you've gleaned anything else beyond just what we saw with that one. Strange moment coming from one of the best defensive backs we have in the OUA, and a veteran in there who, I hate to sound like this guy, but who should know better, But again, without knowing the details of it, I don't want to be too aggressive, but two objectionable conduct penalties. You just really know. We'd be overly generous to say, well, there's probably a good reason why he did that. Come on, man. What are we doing? 2-5.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I don't believe it was two objectionable conducts, because I think two of those get you kicked out of the game.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so what I saw was a hands to the face call, which is an automatic first down, and then chirping with the ref, chirping with the player, chirping with the Queens bench, which got an objectionable conduct, which pushed them up even further. And then a couple plays later, when they're on the goal line, they call him for a pass interference, and they put him like right on the one, which is where all of that happened. And so in those three penalties that happened all in the same drive, he gives up like 30 or 40 yards of yardage to the Queens Gales in that. And like you said, you don't want to be that guy, but like I've done before, man. You know better. I've seen you do better. Come on now. You are easily one of, if not the best defensive back that we have, and especially when they're putting him at corner to be that press coverage against a lot of these top receivers. Like, you ain't gonna have a great day against Richard Adu before, but I don't care if you're a first-year player or a fifth-year player, you can't be doing that kind of stuff, especially in key scenarios like that.
Most definitely. Now, we talked about Vreekin. Let's talk about the guys around him that were, challenging Adu before, and the rest of these Mustangs defensively, as we alluded to. And this was something that you were really excited seeing, that, Ethan Dahl and how he was running the ball. Obviously, Jared Kasari is the guy that we come into the season thinking not only is he RB1 in contention for possibly top rusher in the OUA, but I put his name in the mix as a dark horse MVP candidate, just thinking about how this team could end up being effective and what role he might play into the mix as well. In the passing game, obviously, you have your names like Nathan Falcone, Russell Weir. Russell Weir really, I wish I had the full stat line of what he did. Only a guy like Russell Weir could put together the stats that he had on this day. Matt Camillo in there as well. Matteo Tuioti as well, being a guy that had a really nice day for them as well with the touchdown. In terms of the weapons around Vreekin, what did you make of how Queens offensively was able to put guys in position to have success?
Oh, I loved everything that I saw from these guys. Russell Weir in particular had a really impressive day and key catches in certain areas, but Matteo Tuioti looking like a big man out there. I mean, there was at one point, I think it's near the fourth quarter, maybe one of the OTs, where he catches a ball and Thomas Silcox comes up to give him a hit, and Thomas is the one that gets blown back and actually has to go out for a couple plays with an injury because of how tough it is to tackle this young man. So it was great to see the Queens receiving core, who typically we haven't really been a whole real sure of, but continually step up. I mean, I mentioned it previously, but Nathan Falcone with an unbelievable catch to set up that game tying field goal in the dying seconds of the fourth quarter to send us to overtime was outstanding. And we had some photos sent to us from one Jeff Chan, who is, if you know, he is a phenomenal photographer. He's with the Queens Gales. But there was a pass in the fourth quarter, or the fourth OT, the first play that Alex Vreeken and the rest of that offense has. It's thrown off into one of the corners closest to where the camera is, and unfortunately, the camera can't pan over that far to see the corner of it. So for the folks who are watching the stream, we didn't really get a chance to see it, but there is photo evidence of Jack Ashby Jacobs catching the ball, and he does have one foot down. Now, you can tell even with the shutter speed of the camera, that foot down, ball in his hand is a microsecond. And I don't expect a referee to catch that eyes only with all of the other things that he has to look for. Does he have proper control of the ball? Where's his body placement and everything else? And for that to just happen in a split second and then go, that's really tough. And that's why the NFL has instant replays and all of that fun stuff. If only we had something like that here. But it's got the Queens faithful pretty fired up, let's say.
And as they should be. And we obviously spent a good deal of time at the start of this episode with Dakota talking about our thoughts and feelings on the television product. And part and parcel with that is the various cameras and the idea of replay, which I wouldn't I would love the thought of it in certain situations. But I'm not going to like hold my breath to think that that's going to come to bear anytime soon. Because we're dealing with a week one where you got that moment. You got a QB sneak called touchdown by Keegan Hall in the York Mac game that we were right there on the goal line. And we're checking the photos of the various camera folks down there. And some of them are like, yeah, the tip of the ball's over. Some of them are like, no, the ball's clearly out beforehand. And a fumble that was called not a fumble in the Guelph game, as well as an interception that possibly should have been an incomplete pass. Yes, both of those would have been favorable for the Guelph side of things in that game if they had gone that way. So you can say I'm biased or what have you, but also just go and watch the replay of those moments. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but they certainly weren't like clearly evident as with this one that you're discussing here. And obviously there's that element of like game speed, and that's how the game should be evaluated and refereed and so on and so forth. I'm fully in favor of that. But if nothing else, just if you're Queens, much like we're saying, nice seeing Vreeken back, nice seeing Tuyoti kind of come on the scene. Just as you brought up Jack Ashby Jacobs, the touchdown that didn't happen, but nonetheless, just having him back in there as well is such a boon to this receiving core and this offense as a whole. And I don't know if this is the final stat line because obviously some of these other stats we know aren't accurate, but Jared Kasari listed 9 attempts, 20 yards. You know, whatever it ended up being, we know that regardless if this is accurate or something, a facsimile close to it, clearly we know that his best games are much greater than this. So if that's still waiting in the wings for him to really break out, I'm really, really excited to see what this Queens team can do. And again, it goes back to the fact that as we talk about it, and we'll talk about with Laurier and Guelph, these 4 teams that we project up at the top are just it's going to be so exciting seeing them duke it out in their respective matchups. And gosh, I'm excited the season's here. We're barely out of week 1, and I don't want to start thinking about OUA semifinal matchups and Yates Cup matchups, but it's exciting to think about. Tom, any final thoughts, stones unturned with this matchup or commentary that you wanted to get out before we move on?
Oh no, I loved everything that I saw here. The only thing that I guess I'll say to finish things off, it's a shame that this happened week 1 before that Queens was able to pack the stands, because you know if that was a home opener when the students were in, that stadium would have been rocking with Queens faithful, and that would have added a certain level of to that game. But phenomenal game, phenomenal finish.
And that is the nature of actually one of the mailbag questions we have, but we'll still save it for the end because it talks about more than just that game as well. again, awesome job by both sides. I don't see how if you're either clubs, aside from any worry about injuries, this, that, and the other, you're disappointed with the effort on the day by your club. Queens will hit the road to take on your McMaster Marauders next Saturday, 1 p.m. from Ron Joyce, and Western will take on my Guelph Griffins. Your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins. We'll figure out that coordination. We'll get it. Sunday night, live from Alumni Field. I think it's Alumni Field in Western now. I can't. Half of the you call a field Alumni Field, Alumni Stadium. You'll get it right half the time with these OUA teams. Live from London, 7 p.m. kickoff August 31st. You know we're gonna be there. I hope you will be too. But let's move on to the other games that we had in this outstanding week one affair. And we are going to the one that, I mean, golly, the storylines are just, we start with the Keegan Hall show in York and your Marauders looking really feisty against them, the 4OT game, but this might still be the game. And we have some other games too, including that nightcap that we were at. It was fantastic. This is probably the game that has drawn the attention of OUA and U Sport fans across the country since this game ended sometime on Saturday in the early evening, which was the U of T Blues traveling to Ottawa to take out the Carleton Ravens by a score of 42-23. A halftime score of 27-3. And we obviously read you Scott Barnett's numbers already and what some of those receivers, Chris Joseph being primary among them, did on this day. But if you need a little remembering, I need a little, reminder, I should say. It's a U of T team that had 679 yards of total offense. 567 of those coming in the passing game. Barnett, 32 of 39 for 567 and 4 touchdowns. Chris Joseph, a school record, 18 receptions, 257 and the 2 touchdowns. Jake Oseen, 10 receptions, 164 and a touchdown. And Thomas Roberts with 4 receptions for 146, 1 touchdown, a long of 92. Tom, what are your opening thoughts about this one? I am of all sorts. I don't know what to say. Tom, what first impressions coming off of this ridiculous game?
So I think it's important for us to kind of detail what we saw in real time as this was going on. First off, the emotion that hit both of us, hell yeah. Happy for U of T, happy for our guy and Tommy Kanichis, Jamie Cook, and the rest of that outstanding coaching staff and everything, and just so happy for them. And then very quickly afterwards turned over into frustration at Carleton. At what point in time, Ravens, are you going to realize the potential that we have been talking about for the past 3 years and that you have yet to do? A lot of interesting scenarios here where Tristan Lefebvre is starting over Elijah Barnes, which we didn't see coming. Chris Tupand is not starting on that defense. No sign of Schneider K. Phillips on that defense, and certainly a defense that struggled and could use some all-stars to get back into the fold here. A lot of really strange things. And once again, I detailed this to a couple of Raven faithful that I was talking to before we said this. And let me say, they are not exactly happy with this performance. But when you have these things happen, and from the outside looking in, when there's so many question marks that's here, it's not a great look, because when you're saying, hey, why is Chris Tupand not here? Why is Elijah Barnes not starting? Where's Schneider K. Phillips here? And you don't have anybody who has that insider knowledge, or not even insider knowledge, but like, hey guys, like, this is why we're going here. There's a new defensive coordinator. He's got a new defense, whatever. There's nothing, including the commentators aren't aware of what's going on. It's just not a good look.
Where to begin? Obviously, we know that they have 2 new coordinators, and on the one hand, you got to give grace in saying it's going to take time. And those hires weren't exactly, months ago to be able to establish then what the new teams were going to look like with the offense and the defense. And by all accounts, from what Tristan Ford was saying on the broadcast, quoting Corey Grant, that the quarterback battle in training camp was neck and neck between Barnes and Lefebvre. And obviously we're not in camp. But I just don't fathom, And again, these coordinators, no, I recognize that, the football acumen they bring to the table is vastly greater than what I have. I truly understand that. I truly understand I'm not there in training camp. If it's neck and neck, though, I just don't see how you don't defer not only to the guy who was third in passing last year, behind a guy now in the NFL who won the Heck Crichton last year in Taylor Elgersma, and Keegan Hall, who is possibly this year's OUA MVP frontrunner, maybe could be in the conversation for a Heck. And then a rookie first year starter or second year on the team, first year starting type deal in Elijah Barnes, taking the reins from Lefebvre when he gets injured in week 1. So you have this kid in Elijah who's not even going into the season last year thinking he's going to be the dude, but he takes the reins and doesn't skip a beat. Save for those moments where we're like, you know what? Bit of signs of the youth there, but that'll improve as he gets more reps in the situation. And you opt for the guy in Tristan Lefebvre, who, let me say first and foremost, going into last year, we think, hey, Lefebvre with these weapons, this is going to be an exciting Carleton offense. And it was a really exciting Carleton offense, but with Elijah at the helm, but we think highly of Lefebvre, but he hadn't played a game in about a year. And you then decide that it's so close, it could go either way. I don't get the decision to not go with the guy who was doing it with the guys in this offense all year long last year, who's, I don't have it in front of me. I assume the younger guy, so you can always kind of play it as like, we talked about this with Scott Barnett versus Caleb O'Donohue last year of being like, at a certain point, is there value? I think we actually talked about this too with like other iterations of U of T's quarterback conversations, but like at a certain point, if you don't think you're in a position to really, go for gold, so to speak, there's maybe wisdom in saying, well, then let's go with the younger guy, especially if it's not that big a jump. I think I have to assume Elijah is the younger guy just based on like his, being in his second or whatever year at Carleton. I'm so befuddled by this decision. And again, with what we were expecting from U of T, offensively and defensively, all the while highlighting how much we loved, guys like, Ilya Linney on the defense, Owen Casey, Ryan Stewart on the offensive side of the ball, loving those weapons in Jake Oseen, in Chris Joseph, and just kind of seeing the potential that could be there. A defense that ultimately, Tristan Lefebvre, you think, okay, like, he should be able to then have success against a defense that probably won't at the end of it all be one of the top ranked in the OUA. Happy to be proven wrong on that one, U of T. And so I hate to just play the numbers on this, but then when he starts the game 1 for 7, 21 yards on the day and an interception, I know it's easier to say after the fact when you then compare to Elijah's numbers, but it's almost like this reflects the fact that we knew before the game who should have been the guy. And again, I hate to sound obnoxious saying that because we're not in those meetings, we're not in those practices, we're not in those camps, but it's frustrating. It's so frustrating, Tom.
When you look at that, and once again, exactly like you mentioned, we are not in those meetings, we're not at training camps. Like we haven't seen what the coaches see, and maybe I want to give these coaches the benefit of the doubt because they're great coaches and they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about. So maybe it was a really tight battle, and maybe it was, you know what, we're going to go with Lefebvre because he's got the veteran experience and he's a leader on the team and everything else. To come out then and have Lefebvre go 1 for 7 for 21 yards and a touchdown, or in an interception, excuse me, and not really be able to get anything going offensively, to have Elijah Barnes come in halfway to near the end of the second quarter and drive the ball twice all the way down the field into the red zone. Sure, they weren't able to finish there, but to do it twice immediately as he comes in is not a great look. I mean, even with him starting, like I mentioned, with like 6 minutes left in the second quarter and then finishing off the game, Elijah Barnes finishes 28 for 45, 423 yards passing, and 1 touchdown. And you're going, as a fan on the outside looking in, not being in the meeting rooms or anything, you're going, why was he not the starter here first and foremost? It just doesn't make any sense.
And again, I don't remember when the substitution happened, but you look at what Barnett did with the 567 in the air and the 4 touchdowns, and you say, in at least, a quarter less of action or almost a quarter less of action, Elijah puts up those numbers. When obviously you also there's also that fact of like, well, shoot, we're down now by 17, so we got to pass the ball, and he does it so effectively. And at one point, again, we love Tristan Ford and we love Jeff Morris, and I don't remember the context of when this comment came up, so I'm not saying it to be critical of them, but maybe it's just because of the new coordinators, where one of them was talking about like, I swear one of them said something about like, well, it's a rebuilding year, and to me, I'm like, why on earth? And again, so this is not critical to those two at all, but of like when you have a receiving core, yes, you lose Kasim Ferdinand, and that is huge. I don't want to undersell that, but to be able to say you have a top 3 receiving core, or like a receiving core of like your top 3 guys of Tristan Reddy, Frederick Hatchie, and then Ben Huckabone, to say no more about the other guys in here like Aiden Arndt-Smith or Derek Yeboah and some of these other guys, and a backfield with runners that, number one, if Elijah is in the game, he becomes a runner, and he was still the leading rusher. Not that it was a high bar to be able to surpass, but a guy like Matthew Morin, Keyshawn Reed, Ethan Roca, who showed promising things last year. I'm like, offensively, why would you think that this is anything but the opportunity to say, hey, we can do some special things offensively? Because we did it last year. Yes, Kasim was there, but oh my gosh, Tom, let's
yeah,
talk to you. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add a couple more things in here. I think I loved what I saw from Frederick Hatchie and Tristan Reddy and the rest of that receiving core. Aiden Arnott-Smith, loved to see what he was doing, catching the ball, getting into the end zone as well. Was a lot of really great things to be happy about with this Carleton Raven offense, some question marks and some things that don't make a lot of sense here. But I don't want that to take away from the unbelievable job that the U of T Blues did on that side of things. Like offensively, we're looking at this, and a lot of what we saw, at least in the first half, was crossers or quick outs into one side, and Scott Barnett just being smart with the football, finding the open guy, and then allowing guys like Chris Joseph and Jake Oseen to make the first guy miss, knife up the field and gain 17 yards, 20 yards, 15 yards in certain scenarios here, and then to go for the home run shot. I mean, one of the greatest aspects of that, and you pointed it out to me as well, first drive that Elijah gets in, he's able to drive the ball all the way down, and then, and I have to mention this, you drive the ball all the way down the field with Elijah throwing the ball, and he looks solid. He looks great. He's finding his receivers. It's 3rd and 3 or 4, and you run the football instead of relying on the outstanding offense that was able to get you down the field like that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I didn't love that call. And then you turn the ball over. U of T gets the ball, and immediately Scott Barnett finds Thomas Roberts for that 92-yard touchdown grab that you mentioned earlier, and it's an immediate swing from you were going to be up 7 to now you're down 7, a 14-point swing with that one series of events here. But you see what happens with Scott Barnett. That offensive line in front of him was doing great. They gave him enough time to find these quick routes, and those receivers just played phenomenal. So a lot of what we're going to be saying is going to be frustrations towards Carleton, but I don't want any of that to take away from how friggin' well U of T played in key scenarios, and they earned this win. They really did, but a lot of really questionable things that Carleton did that makes us scratch our heads.
Most definitely. And the thing that it's hard not to even talk about their success without just getting frustrated with what we saw from Carleton defensively. Because, Tom, 3 receivers caught balls. Like at a certain point, beyond just the scheme that you're running, and this is very similar, actually. We were saying this beforehand, that week 1 last year, U of T goes to Waterloo, they pick up the win, and in large part, it's crossing routes by guys like Chris Joseph and Jake Oseen. Chris Joseph, who now with Jackson Finley not being in the league, might be the fastest dude in the OUA. I mean, Jackson Finley's replacement and Jackson McKay might be, competing with Chris Joseph for the reins. So just getting Joseph the ball at full speed, even if he's going east-west to begin with, is just going to create that separation for him to then be able to get downhill, go north-south, and make some explosive things. Jake Oseen, very similar. Thomas Roberts. So first and foremost, And again, beyond just deferring to the expertise of these coordinators in the league, I'll also add, obviously, I'm not a defensive guy, but certainly schematically at a certain point, and you were picking up on some of the things Carleton was doing that U of T was brilliant in taking advantage of, and I'll get past through the reins to talk about that. But at a certain point, like, you just have to say, like, we will not let you do this. Like, we are just not going to allow these receivers to run comfortably across the formation any which way they want to. Like, I just, again, without being a defensive mind of really any caliber, I just, at a certain point, it's like, they're doing this one thing really, really well that actually has us supremely behind the eight ball right now. Maybe we don't allow them to do that. And obviously, easier said than done. And I don't want to take away from the fact that a certain point of U of T being like, they're not allowing us to do it. We're doing it, right? And again, totally recognize that. Great stuff for U of T. We love it when, I mean, the two Toronto teams picked up wins in week one. I literally don't think that's ever happened. We kept Dakota up way too late in the night because I gave him a challenge of saying, well, it'd be a great piece of content for you to post on social media if you confirm that one way or the other. But man, great job by them. Again, I'll frame it positively. Great job by U of T taking advantage of the openings by which they could then just say it's going to be a four-man show here offensively from Barnett's hands to either Joseph Oseen or Roberts. Great job by them of taking what the opposing team was giving them and making hay out of it, or whatever the expression is going to be. But Tom, you were picking up on in watching that game some of the things that whether it's Coach Kanichis or Coach Cook were really picking up on, or who knows, maybe it was Coach Da being a defensive guy being like, hey, like we should be attacking this. What was it that made U of T's offense so potent, especially given the way that Carleton was defending them?
Well, it really just seemed like Carleton was continually running hold coverage. And when you had crossers or when you had out routes that were happening, all Scott Barnett was doing is, okay, I'm going to wait for my receiver to get through the halfback and wait for that gap in between where the half and the corner is, and I'm going to throw that ball. That ball is caught by outstanding athletes in Jake Oseen or in Chris Joseph, who make somebody miss and then are able to knife out the field. And it looked like they were just continuously doing that over and over again. And once again, this is why I want to give credit to Scott Barnett, because he's not forcing anything and he's making sure that he's smart with the football and just, hey, I have a guy who I know is a hell of an athlete who is not being covered by anybody or has 5 yards of space. That's very dangerous for a dude with that kind of speed. Let's get him the ball and see what works. And it worked a lot of the time here. So I'm okay with the initial concept of like, okay, we're going to keep everything in front of us here defensively and then come downhill. But if you're going to do that, you better damn well be able to tackle when something like that happens. And a lot of times the first guy who was coming out to these guys missed that tackle, causing first down yardage damn near every time they touch the ball.
And just for a point of clarification for folks who aren't as familiar, what Tom is referring to as hold coverage is typically a form of a cover three deep safeties where your halfbacks are staying in the lower zones and your corners are dropping deep. So as he's alluding to, when those crossers pass that low zone man in the half towards the sideline on either side, they're able to get the ball with speed, put their foot in the ground, turn it up. And then again, if you're not rallying to the ball effectively, you're having to catch a really fast dude with some space to be able to go with it. And frankly, again, to be able to just pray at the altar of Scott Barnett a little bit more, those are not easy passes to make, first and foremost, especially when you have guys who are that fast. We talked about it last year, where especially with Tristan Aboot, that one of the things that we noticed, and I think it lined up with him getting, truly becoming the guy in that offense, and then the confidence that comes with it, of early on the season, he struggled making sure that ball was in front of his receiver. We saw that progress. That's hard to do. Barnett, injured for a lot of last year, for him to come into the season with the confidence to put that ball in the right spot is awesome. And again, that's then reflective of the coaching staff in instilling this young man with the confidence of knowing, look, we trust you. You trust your receivers, and trust the scheme, and just make plays and let it rip. And boy, oh boy, did he ever! So again, just you're totally right to frame it as being like, let's just talk about the positive things for what they did. And what I'll say as well is that we had question marks about Carleton defensively coming into this year. I think even when we talked to Tristan Ford when we did the exit meeting about Carleton, he even expressed, yes, the offense really exciting. Defensively, there's some question marks. But as I look at this participation list and the box score for Carleton. And, obviously, with losing Ife Onyeka, those are shoes that don't get filled, right? Until the next generational talent comes. We recognize that. But they get back L. James Agamudo, who I believe was hurt for most of last year at cornerback. You have guys like Xavier Malone, Jake Henderson, who was a ball hawk for them as well. Obviously, we talked about Chris Tupen in the mix, and as well, if nothing else, just because it's fun to say his name, Megawatt Rajiro. Some good pieces on that defense. I know it's a new system for them, but it's frustrating when you just think to yourself, man, oh man, like you got the pieces there. It's tough. It's really tough. And in messaging with a Carleton alum myself this morning, especially dropping the first to U of T, they're like, this, man, oh man, does this have the making of a 1-7 season for this team? Based on, and this is from an alumni close to this program, that this could be spell disaster for Carleton. I think that if they right the ship with Elijah, they have the bye week to figure it out. But man, oh man, they have put themselves behind the 8 ball magnificently. And for U of T, it'll be fascinating to see how sustainable that offensive output was, to say the least. Tom, final thoughts or anything else we missed for this game before we put it to bed? Certainly not for the last time, but for at least for right now.
Initially, when you're looking at the schedule, I'm thinking, oh man, a week 2 bye, that really stinks. Could not happen to a better team that needs a bit of extra time in order to get right whatever they need here. So I'm hoping that this team goes into the bye week, having learned what they've learned from this Toronto game, and just comes out ready to go in this one. Because let's not forget, for folks who don't remember here, they have a bye this week. Then they play against Waterloo, and I actually really liked a lot of things that I saw from this Waterloo squad, so that's not just going to be an easy dub. And then it's Western, York, Guelph, Ottawa, Laurier, and McMaster. There is a not small chance that this team could go 0-8 if they don't figure things out.
And next week, these U of T Blues will be hosting those Waterloo Warriors from Varsity Field, 7 p.m. kickoff. Saturday night, gosh, I'm going to be there. Night game at U of T is a sight to behold. And that, I think, will give us a lot of information thinking about this Waterloo team, the challenge they could present to U of T, and what that tells us maybe about how that game against Carleton could fare. Because what your McMaster Mirage did to York tell me that week 9 game going into the season, I'm circling that as a dub for Carleton, no problem. You were quick to say earlier on that could be trouble. That's an opportunity for Mac to pick up a win. I'm certainly, from where we're sitting now with 1 week's worth of information behind us, saying if nothing else changed from now and then, I am very much all in on Mac in that game right now. And let's talk about those Waterloo Warriors, because they're the team that Carleton has up next after the bye, that U of T has up next in week 2. And they were starting their season off at home against the Ottawa GGs, probably the least eventful game of all these games, but not to speak poorly of this game, just that there was 4 games that just, hopefully no one has to do any piss testing for, if these games would have some kind of banned substances in them. But final score in this one, Ottawa 27, Waterloo 12. Tom, the theme that I had presented to you coming into this game, and frankly, it was the same theme of that Carleton game, and Carleton clearly, didn't come through on it. But for Ottawa was to say, by all accounts, knowing the pieces that we expect to be in play for you at various positions, how you're building off your success last year, that impressive loss, albeit, but great game in Guelph in the first round of the playoffs. Charles Asselin looking like he's one of the top players, irrespective of position in the league. Josh Jansen, perhaps the first year of knowing it's his year to rock and roll. I want to see Otto come out and against a team that, gosh, as always, all the love in the world for Waterloo. Love Waterloo football, Waterloo region football. Love y'all. But then a team that on paper, Ottawa, you should get the win, taking you to get the win, and you did, but do so in a way that kind of shows you're here to really, you mean business, right? You're in that something to prove territory. There's at least 4 teams that we know in Guelph, Queens, Western, and Laurier that we're like, look, we're comfortably putting them ahead of you. But can you make yourself out the gate the best of that next bunch of teams? I don't know if they quite did that on the day, but you know what? I'm not walking away being disappointed by Ottawa. I think coming out of this one, similar with Mac and York, the Mac and York game, my main thing is I'm like, you know, really liked what I saw out of Waterloo. First impressions, Tom, for you coming out of this game on either side of the ledger, whether the Ottawa side of things or Waterloo, take it away. Again, the least exciting in terms of some of the splash we saw in the other games, but you know what? Happy with what I saw out of both clubs.
Well, the first thing that I'll say, and that I'm fairly disappointed in, is when you turn into the stream,
Oh, God.
it starts with 6 minutes left in the second quarter, and it's 7-4 already, and we're going, would have been great to watch that, especially with our guy Adam McGuire on the call. He'd always does such a phenomenal job of calling this, and to have a good chunk or almost the entire first half cut out of this was pretty disappointing. Although we did get a chance to see the first touchdown of the game, which comes off a hook and ladder to our guy in Charles Aslan, which was pretty cool to see, but still would have been nice to see the entirety of that first half. But other than that, some quick notes here. I can't get over how much I like Nick Orr. I loved his pocket presence. I thought made smart decisions with the football for the most part, and he was pushing the ball down the field pretty consistently here. I am very happy that he has continued to step into that starting quarterback position and seems to own it outright, and rightfully so. I think he had a great experience at East West in the spring, and he's brought that experience over into here. He finished 19 of 30 for 210 yards, no touchdowns, no picks, and then picked up another 44 yards on the ground as well. But I really loved his pocket presence and the way that he was able to move the ball down the field. I like a lot what I saw from him. And Josh Jansen, while I was expecting slightly bigger numbers, and shout out to that Waterloo defense because I think they did play a great game, 16 for 23, 222 yards and a touchdown. Good to see Josh once again in that same vein step into that QB1 role and own that position outright as I'm the dude for the GGs this year.
Most definitely. And just going back to the Nick Orr piece of it, one of the things I think we learned about his game last year that rang true in this matchup as well is that the pocket presence is great, but he knows when to just call it quits on a play and just take off, and he can run effectively. Ends up being their leading rusher with 44 yards. And in talking about the rushing attack for Waterloo, Quentin Springer, 5 attempts, 21 yards. We know he's capable of more. I loved seeing that Anthony Miller was back. I don't know what year of football this is for Waterloo, and maybe I'm just over embellishing. Maybe he hasn't been around as long as I think he has. I think he's been in that program. He might be a pre-COVID dude, but one way or the other, just again that with a younger guy in Quentin Springer, though I guess this is his third year now. Love it when you have that veteran as well. Again, Anthony Miller didn't produce terribly on rushing the ball. He actually was their leading receiver of all things, taking in 4 passes for 44 yards. Right behind him, Isaac White, a kid I'm familiar with from my time in London, a quarterback from London South who came into this program as a quarterback. They've seemingly converted him into a receiver, and hey, 3 catches for 37 yards. Shout out to my guy Isaac White. So loved seeing that. But you're right in terms of like what Waterloo was doing defensively. Really impressed by it, and I want to shout out the performances of, in specific, dudes like Keyshawn Brown up front and Marcus Miller for at times really causing trouble for that Ottawa offensive line, an offensive line that is consistently. Well, very consistent, that brought back Tristan Fortin, who spent some time, got drafted, spent some time with the CFL this year. And I was really impressed by how they were able to bring some pressure with their defensive line up front. And you have Michael Omaseni behind them, so that gives you a lot of leeway, if you will, to be able to, you got a good garbage guy in the back to clean things up if things get messy. So that's a great privilege to be able to have. But we obviously talked about, well, you're losing Anestu Latmore and just what he can do from that safety position, not just in coverage, but being able to bring pressure. And, again, I was really impressed with how they were able to attack Ottawa and seemingly defensively just stick to a game plan that kind of makes sense. You and I being very familiar with what K-Mac often likes to do during his time in his different stops throughout the OUA, because we were very worried that with the potential this Ottawa team has in almost a similar manner to what we saw from York, when you have all these weapons that you can spread out, and when you have a running back in Aslan who can go out as a wideout, and you still have a really solid running back in Soliman Kamara in the backfield, that is a great way to say you really want to keep bringing pressure when we have all these guys out here that we can just get the ball out, the big arm of Josh Jansen, then all right, let's go. So I was really happy that Waterloo defensively looked pretty comfortable against a team in Ottawa that clearly I think we know will look better as the year progresses. This is the potential we know is much higher than what we saw. But again, part of that goes to the credit of a lot of that goes to Coach McNeil and his defense on this day.
Yeah, I loved seeing Keyshawn Bowen almost have a piece of that Enisu Latmar in that blitzing off the edge, causing havoc in the backfield, and really being able to be something of a Swiss Army knife for K-Mac in that defense. I also loved Michael Omaseni. He only finished with 4 tackles, but there was one in particular, I think it was in the third quarter. Ottawa's close to the red zone. I think they're on like the 10-yard line, and Charles Aslan gets the ball ready to knife up the field, and Omaseni meets him in the hole and immediately stops his forward progression there. And I love to see that. I think he had a great game as well, just being in key places. Like I said, he only finished with 4 tackles, but the actual play that he had tells a story as well. So I loved first game in year 2. You can already start to see that K-Mac effect on this defense, getting better and better, getting a little nastier, getting a little meaner, and getting into backfield and laying the boom on some dudes. So loved what I saw from that side of things as well.
Now, flipping the script to Ottawa defensively, for starters, one of the things that, again, partly missing the opening part of the stream. And then, as I alluded to, we watch a lot of football to be able to bring you the coverage that we do. So you try to, do so as efficiently as possible. So maybe I missed something, but at least as far as on the defensive statistics, which given he's a middle linebacker, not seeing him there, to me speaks to the fact that maybe he wasn't playing. But did you see Daniel Briere out there? Yeah, I didn't either. And that's a problem for me because he's on the roster. So that sounds like it alludes to that he, I guess, would have been an injury for them. Maybe I should check the participation list for this. But that's, that I don't like seeing for the potential of this defense. But what I did like seeing with this defense, and your usual suspects, Denny Ferdinand, year 2 with the GGs, Jackson Boucher in that defensive secondary, and of course our dude in Patrick Cumberbatch. Still love the names on the back end there. But our guy, Riley Hildebrandt, I love that we gave Oliver, the D tackle from Queens that we
Jackson.
Oliver Jackson, that's the one. Guy's got 2 first names. It's confusing. But if not him, Riley Hildebrandt, certainly a guy that I would have loved to have nominated, and maybe we should have mentioned at the time as an honorary or sort of a considerable player for week 1, defensive player of the week. 5 total tackles, 1.5 sacks, 7 yards total on TFLs. It doesn't actually list the number that he received, probably just off of those 1.5 sacks, and just being very disruptive in the middle of that Waterloo offensive line. We know that he's obviously a veteran guy, 5th-year dude. We talked about Max von Muhldorfer maybe being the best interior guy, and I still think that's probably is the case. And if it's not him, Riley's probably short order one of, if not the best we have on the interior D-line across the OUA. Need to see 44 Daniel Briere on this team and cooking, but on the day you give up 12 points, you got to be happy with the performance defensively if you're Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you don't allow a team into the end zone, that's always going to be a good day. Daniel Briere is listed on the participation, so he might have gotten injured in that time where we didn't see him, and we'll have to rely on the folks who listen to this pod and want to correct us here. But still, there's a lot of really great pieces on here, and like you said, awesome to see Riley Hildebrandt really own that inside or that interior of that defensive line. He's been a stalwart on that Ottawa defense just in general, but I'd love to see him continue to expand and continue to build. And if he can start getting pressure from that 3-tech position on quarterbacks more consistently here, that gives guys a lot more capabilities here in the back end. But one thing that I saw here, potentially the best back end, at least boundary halfbacks that we have here, Denny Ferdinand and Patrick Cumberbatch on the same side and the same end. I think like 90% of all of Waterloo's passing came from the field side of that, just trying to get away from those dudes. And the one time Nick Orr came over that side, it was immediately knocked down by Denny. So I don't know how many teams are really going to want to go boundary side against these guys with those two studs there, but you might have to look into maybe spreading that awesomeness out a little bit more on the rest of that Ottawa defense.
It's again with Denny and Cumberbatch there. That is an incredible dynamic duo into the boundary. Ottawa offensively, again, not a knock your socks off type performance. You read the numbers for Josh Jansen, the 16 to 23. Got an efficient day, the 222 and the one touchdown. Noah Avery ends up being his go-to guy, as we would assume, 6 catches for 105. Romeo Lucier going to his second year, 3 catches, 69 yards on the touchdown. Robin Couillard, 3 receptions as well. Charles Asselin, really not a major impact in this game beyond that hook and ladder play. And maybe that's just game planning, maybe saying that, look, we'll let them beat us with anyone else but Charles Asselin, which is all well and good. But similarly, as we talked about with Queens, just knowing that, look, you had a great day despite the loss. I mean, Ottawa picks up the win, but a great day you're talking about Queens, and you know that if nothing else, you're going to get way better Jared Kasari days. If you're Ottawa, again, I want to see a bit more out of them, but the fact that they were able to do this against a team in Waterloo that, again, you don't get in the end zone, but very happy with a lot of things that we were seeing and the day for Nick Orr, so on and so forth. But you're going to get better days out of Charles Asselin, days where he is going to be the driving force that wins you those games. And then to think as well, just in the wings, a guy like, what's my guy's name? Another second-year receiver for them. Oh, and Tristan Gilbert Thibault, who's, I believe, was on the participation, but doesn't make it to the stat sheet. So just thinking as well, another guy that we saw produce them last year as a young dude, again, with him and Couillard, and Lucier, these second-year receivers with the vets in Avery and in Asselin. It's a nice skill pool that they have there around a guy in Jansen who, again, solid game. And if the running attack is better with Asselin, then they might be able to, really do some big things with Jansen just having that as his consistent year, a kind of whatever that works out to on the average 16 to 22, that, low to mid 200 yards or such. Like that could be what we get from him that makes this team a competitive team. But I think it's fair to say too, same with Asselin, knowing that we're going to get better games from him where it is a little splashier. I mean, it's hard to be splashier than a hook and ladder, but the same goes for Josh Jansen. Like we know that there are going to be games coming out of this game. I think it's fair to say, all right, you've set a baseline. I mean, which is kind of ludicrous to say a baseline from one game, but I think it's fair to say that you shouldn't perform any less than this. From what we know he can do, the weapons he has around him, yes, he's going to play better defenses, but I feel like this is the floor for Josh Jansen. I think it should only get better from him. I love what they have with these weapons. And yeah, Suleiman Kamara as well. I really think that he can make a leap this year too.
Yeah, and I want to once again give credit to that Waterloo defense. They did not allow Aslan or Kamara to do anything on the ground, or at least not nearly the same level of production that we normally seen from them. I mean, Charles Aslan had his longest young run of like 5 yards, and that came near the end of the fourth quarter. They were constantly on him, making sure that he was not going to be the one to beat them. I mean, 13 attempts for 21 yards, an average of 1.6. I don't think that's ever happened to Charles. So that's a huge shout out to this Waterloo defense. But I completely agree with you. This is your base. This is your bottom tier of what your baseline should be. It's all should be up from here with the performance that we've seen from Josh Jansen in big games, specifically against Laurier for the past 2 years with a phenomenal defense, with how well we know Charles Aslan can do. I mean, we don't nickname you King Charles for nothing. This is an offense that should slowly but surely get better and better and better here. And I think the expansion of Josh Jansen being 100% QB1 with no other people chomping at his heels, I think we're going to see this Ottawa GG's offense really come into their own as the weeks go on.
I'm really excited to see them take on York, which they're going to be doing next week from the nation's capital, 4 p.m. kickoff. I think that's a game where we can really see the roof come off of what this team can do. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game. Can't wait to talk about that on the week 2 preview. And Waterloo, as we mentioned as well, are taking their talents on the road for what will be, if nothing else, just a beautiful night from downtown Toronto, Varsity Stadium, under the lights, 7 p.m. kickoff. Where else would you rather be if you are in the greater Toronto area? But we have one more game to talk about, Tom, and we've been talking football for a long time, so let's spare no more time in getting into what we set up as what would be the crown jewel of week 1 in the OUA. And amazingly, most weeks, it probably would be. This week, with everything you've heard us talk about, it may have come up short, but not because the game was anything less than stellar, because this one came down right to the wire. Final score, the Laurier Golden Hawks 33, the Guelph Griffins 28. Where to begin, Tom? Where to begin? Tom, this is a game going into halftime, has Laurier up 23 to nothing. And I am incensed, not because Guelph's down by that much, because I think I said at some point being like, am I worried that Guelph can score 3 touchdowns and like get back into this? No, but you're also saying, can they score that and also limit Laurier at the same time? That's what's tough. And I alluded to some of these moments, earlier when we were talking about who knows what. This is hours ago at this point. But at the end of the first half, yes, I'm going to start here, Tom. Guelph shuts down Laurier from getting another 6. They have to settle for the field goal. The refs throw a roughing the kicker call that I haven't gone back to look, and I was booing. I wasn't happy with it, and of course I was. But it puts Laurier on the 1. They get the touchdown to make it 23-0. That plus a couple other moments here and there where, yeah, I'm biased, but if you watch the game, it's just like, that's just unfortunate that those like moments that, not to say that the refs had it in for Laurier by any means. Calm down, Mr. Drinkwater. I'm not saying that, but you know that a game's going to have those moments. And I hate it because obviously I want Guelph to win. I want Guelph to win every game. I just hate it that it felt like they just ended up being in Laurier's favor. Not out of any intentionality, but just that usually, you get a couple here and there. I'm sure the Laurier fans out there, they're probably like, well, what about this when this happened? What about this when this happened? I don't know why that's the voice I have for what a Laurier fan sounds like. We met a lot of them, so I know it doesn't. But gosh, that was frustrated. But much like we said with many of these games, at the end of the day, I'm walking out of Alumni Stadium, and as we're chopping it up with players on both sides and coaches on both sides, but specifically from the Guelph side of things, much like with Queens, yeah, you wish you took care of business at home and picked up the dub, but you can't be anything but pleased in walking out of this and knowing we can beat those guys. We can hang with those guys. We showed it last year. We can hang with those guys. And this year it's no different. Again, it's that separation between the proven and the prove it. But man, you can't be disappointed because, again, even when they're putting up zeros in the first half, we're thinking they're showing everything they need to show offensively. We'll get into the details of it, of where we thought it was different in the second half, specifically how Tristan Aboud was sort of managing his time in the pocket. But I'm not upset about this one ultimately as a Guelph homer on the day, and it was great seeing this Laurier offense with Callum Wither. I'm just so happy we did the doubleheader and saw that one live. It was an awesome game to be at.
Yeah, and when you talk about, just as a quick shout out to everybody else, you talk about 2 phenomenal settings and people who treated us so well and were so gracious. And the folks at York, like you mentioned, leading us out onto the field, showing us the VIP section, the press box and everything else, and just saying, thank you so much for being here. Go wherever you'd like so that you can call the game. And then they go back to Guelph. And of course, yes, you're the alum, and yes, I used to coach there back in the day, but they don't need to treat us as well as they do, and they always do. So shout out to Sarah Garrett, shout out to Billy Brown and the Friends of Griffin Football. They are just phenomenal at what they do, and it was really awesome to get a chance to be there. But I mean, this is a Laurier squad, and if folks didn't know it before, I hope you watch this and you believe it now. They are just as, if not maybe a slight touch, not as, but they are a very good football team, and that's a Yates Cup caliber team, first and foremost. I mean, anytime you can just get Ethan Jordan the ball on a quick out route and he takes it 71 yards for a touchdown. And as he's running, Zach's looking at him being like, yeah, he's the best receiver. He's the best receiver in youth sports. And now it's his touchdown. Okay, yeah, awesome, great. I mean, when you have that, and even like Callum Withers, he finished 17 for 27, 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not blow your socks off by any means, but once again, highlights where your strengths are. Ethan Jordan, 8 catches, 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ryan Hughes, 5 catches for 39. Leomi Ojitalayo, a 1 catch for 12. Jace Atkinson, getting these guys involved in the passing game and just getting them the ball in space and allowing them to do their thing. I think Leomi, when he had the ball for that 1 catch for 12 yards, he broke like 5 or 6 tackles in order to gain that yardage. So you've got phenomenal athletes here. All you got to do, like Coach Falls has said, is be that facilitator.
Yeah, and frankly, we went with Garrity for Special Teams Player of the Week. Had it not been for the 4 overtimes and just the nature of how important it is being a kicker in those situations and how clutch he came through, starting with just the running game as well, Tayshaun Jackson is possibly, like, which is a bananas to say when they have Ethan Jordan and Ryan Hughes, Quentin Scott, Leomi, and all these other weapons. Tayshaun, I think is the most dangerous player on this team with the ball in his hands. And he carries the ball for 13 attempts, 94 yards and a touchdown, which is awesome. That looks like growth from last year, him becoming that RB1 with Nelms hanging him up. Quentin Scott in his first game back, the 9 attempts for 56 yards. Really nice to see him. And man, like we talked about how like you go from the thunder and lightning of whether it was Nelms and Scott or Nelms and Jackson, because Nelms was that big downhill runner. And they still have Darian Bassick-Hayden, who's a big dude as well. But you go from a thunder and lightning matchup to just a lightning and lightning matchup because Scott is lightning quick as well. But I wanted to talk about Tayshaun Jackson for a moment because we were discussing him being the special teams player of the game. And when you look at it by the numbers, it's like, well, he has 1 kickoff return for 70 yards. That's a great return. But how does that make you special teams player of the game, of the week? Well, I'll tell you how. Because that return was off the first kickoff, was from the kickoff off of Guelph's first touchdown in the third quarter. When he took it 70 yards to then set up Laurier for, I don't even remember how Guelph managed to shut the door without them picking up points. Great on them by that. Obviously love it. But you know what they decided to do? We're going to moonshot pooch punt wherever we kick it again, because we'd rather you just receive the ball on the 35 or 40 than us risk having to cover him. And the one thing I was saying in this game, and obviously all the love in the world for Donovan Carter, just all the respect is just deserved and everything like that, and not a shot at him, where offensively, and we'll talk about what Guelph did offensively when they really got going and how that key difference that we saw specifically from Aboud in the second half. And defensively, you give up the 33 to this defense. Man, I think that Guelph defense I think they're ultimately happy with that performance. You take away that giant play by Ethan Jordan, and yes, it happened, so you can't just take it away, but there's some solace in being able to say, guys, we just can't give up giant plays and contain them a little bit better, and we'll be good. So offensively, defensively, I feel good. Guelph matchup with Laurier. Special teams, man, it felt lopsided to Laurier's favor. And not just because of what Tayshaun does, but on kickoffs by Laurier, on punts, where it felt like they were playing 13 on 12 the way sometimes. And of course, half the time it's number 11 and Leomi being the first one down there. He's one of the best special teamers in Canada. So I'm not terribly mad at that. And that's partly why I think their special teams units right now are a bit better. But where I'm like, man, and as you highlighted to me when we were talking about it, it's like that was the difference in the game last year because of the Tayshaun Jackson kickoff return touchdown. And it's just those things. And we saw it with Western and picking up the win where, Garrity's not going to miss in those situations. So your special teams is as good as everything else you do. And that's why that's that proven tier. That's that championship tier. And that's the one thing coming out of the game where I was like, oh, man, I don't think Guelph's special teams are poor by any means, but Laurier's are just that much more impressive.
Yeah, I think that Laurier and how well Well, the athletes that they have going down on special teams are incredible. I had a chance to meet up with Laomi Ochotolio after the game and dap him up, and you just get to chatting. And when I talked to him about what he's looking forward to in this season, what his goals are and everything, he didn't talk about receiving. He didn't talk about offense at all. His goals for this season are 3 tackles a game on special teams. That's his mentality going into this. And when you have a receiver like Laomi, who can be one of the top in Canada, if you give him the ball enough, or if he's in certain scenarios, for him to say, like, yeah, the offensive side, I'm going to work my tail off and I'm going to do my thing, but I really want to dominate on specials. And the amount of times where you and I are watching something and you're getting hyped up, like, oh, there's a crease here. We got some Laomi, son of a, come on, man, just let him get by. And he makes another key tackle to get down there. He has outstanding what he does. And then you look the guys receiving the ball, and Tayshaun Jackson, he may be one of the best, if not the best, in Canada. And when he gets the ball in his hands and he's able to take off and make guys miss here. So very, very dangerous on either side when you're kicking off or receiving for these Laurier Golden Hawks, special teams wise.
And that might be Laomi's goal. And I know that he can hit that goal and exceed it too. But I think he's going to have a very productive offensive year for no other reason, like beyond the fact that we just know he's skilled. I don't think we've actually talked about this on a pod since it came to light. And I don't know how much time we want to spend on it, but we're not going to be seeing Raiden Thorne with this offense this year. This what you, as it often is the case with me not being on social media, this was something that you found out about and then told me. Again, I don't really want to, I don't know. Well, you know the story. I'll let you tell it however you want to. To me, the important thing is that he's not going to be back for them this year, though. And whatever else we say is, you can find out the rest of the story, I guess.
Yeah, there's a few different storylines that are going out there in terms of why he's not coming back, whether it was a decision or anything along those lines. But the main point here is that Raiden Thorne is not going to be back on this Laurier offense. And while, yes, they have unbelievable targets, and obviously you've got Ethan Jordan, Ryan Hughes, Laomi Ochotolio, Jace Atkinson, Ryan Spade, and all of these guys here, Raiden Thorne still brought a fantastic ability to this game as well. So to not have him does take something away, but it just means that other people have to step up in this regard. And I think that Laomi is completely in that space to step up and to be a main contributor offensively for this squad.
Most definitely. Let's flip the script to talk about Guelph offensively, because you mentioned how if U of T didn't do what they did offensively, then Keegan Hall is probably the guy we're going to talk about in terms of offensive player of the weekend, probably rightfully so. If not for Keegan Hall doing all the things that he did, and even still, it may have been a debate nonetheless, Tristan Aboud had a nice stat line for himself on the day. I hope you started him in your fantasy. He goes 27 for 41, 415 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception that was the nail in the coffin late. Well, actually, sorry, it wasn't the nail in the coffin. It seemed like it was at the time to our guy, Ethan Gregorczyk, and then carries the ball 9 times for 96 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. But Tom, it was a bit of a tale of two halves with him, in large part with his maybe willingness is the word, I don't know, but with how quickly, I'll say, he was willing to just put aside whatever reads he was looking for and just take off and run. And all of that in large part only happens because he was sitting so comfortably in that pocket all game long. And it made my heart warm so much just seeing the pride in Coach McDonald after the game, and rightfully so, just knowing what a great game that offense had, that offensive line specific. But Tristan, at times, we were joking, might have had too much time in the pocket early on, or was maybe a bit too comfortable earlier on.
So, yeah, a couple of interesting pieces in here. First and foremost, what I want to say is that Guelph offensive line picked up right where they left off in being one of the top in the entirety of the OUA. I mean, once again, having those guys come back, and then, like we mentioned, and like I thought, it's like I know a couple things about football or something. Daniel Hosevar going from that right tackle into that right guard and not missing a beat, and having Alex Gordon come in at right tackle and play fantastic, despite the fact that man only weighs 255 pounds. He might as well be a toothpick out there compared to offensive line. And one of my favorite moments here is you coming up to Coach McDonald being like, you gave me crap because I was underweight. You better have been on him too.
To which he was like, I was. So
yeah. But to see that, and absolutely, when I'm first watching this, and because of the nature of who you and I are and where we're watching what we're seeing, oftentimes if there's a choice between watching the front seven or the back seven or the back five, we're going to be watching the front seven to see how things are going here. And we're seeing that. And once again, like you said, Tristan Boot has enough time to go through his first read, his second read, his third read, his fourth read. I want to see what my first read is doing again, and then almost repeat the process. I think they averaged like 5 or 6 seconds in the back end before he actually had to make a decision. And we're saying, wow, this is great, or he has to get the ball out. Somebody who's close to the program and knows a damn thing about receiver play. I don't know if I want to mention his name,
No.
but he comes up and he says, I didn't like what I saw from the Guelph receivers. And my eyes go wide. I go, what do you like? Willem Arsenault looks great. Harry Vardy, Jared Tessy with that leaping dive in the end zone. Like, what do you mean? He goes, I don't like the effort that I saw from these guys in scramble drill rules, what you're supposed to do, how hard you're supposed to work. The fact that Tristan Aboud is sitting back there for so long to the point where he has to take off and run because he can't find anybody. Now, this is also a bit of a catch-22 because that defensive secondary for Laurier is unbelievable. And if there's one group that I could believe would constantly cover receivers regardless of scramble drill, it's those guys. But this individual who, once again, knows something about being a receiver, came up and said, no, in order to properly play receiver, you have to have an ego. You have to be like, I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to catch the ball. This is my ball, and I'm going to go get it. And he didn't see that, and he made it very well known that he didn't see that. And so another piece to bring into this as well, and yes, maybe could Tristan Aboud have gotten the ball out a little faster? Sure, potentially. But also, he's not going to force the ball into bad scenarios. We've seen his development as a quarterback over the years, and he's getting better and better and better. So if he's not going to force it in there, he's just going to start taking off and running, which is exactly what he did. And so maybe some of that focus at least needs to be on these Guelph receivers and saying, how well are you really working to get open, especially after your initial 3-second route is done? What else are you doing in order to try to get open for your team?
And I, like you, defer to the expertise of the individual you spoke with, undoubtedly. I'm still willing to give a little more grace just because, again, Malik Cote had such a tremendous game, had a touchdown saving breakup in the end zone. Ethan Bayfield had a big breakup at one point. Jahari Hastings came up big. Jesse Wilkins-Flaherty was flying around the ball. Grigorczyk, as we were mentioning, got the interception late that we thought at the time was the nail in the coffin. Our guy, Harner Dollywall, patrolling in the deep middle, just looking sharp out there, looking athletic as he's ever been. You love seeing it. So it is tough. As you said, it's that, well, how much of it do you want to just give credit to that Laurier defense? Because we came into this game being like, they're going to go to be potentially one of the best defenses that we have in all of OUA. So it's a little bit of both. But to your point, what just looked so much better was that Aboud going through those reads and just saying, oh, right, I'm actually really fast too, and get downhill really quickly. And then he started to take off, and that sort of just changed the texture of the game a little bit for Guelph offensively. That was able to give them that momentum that they need to go on that 21-0 run in the third quarter that was so impressive. And to me, again, didn't reflect like a complete, we always talk about like halftime changes and this, that, and the third. And it's or adjustments. It's like, I don't think they really changed anything or adjusted anything other than maybe just going into Tristan's ear and talking to Coach McDonald afterward. I think he was saying that he was probably the one amongst a few people of driving that bus, if you will, of being like, dude, go, just take off at a certain point, just run. Because again, we were watching the first half, and I'm like, it's tough because this offense for Laurier, that you can only hang with them for so long if you're not converting on sixes. But everything was looking good their way. Now, in talking about converting sixes, sometimes you got to settle for threes. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but we kind of brought it up earlier in talking about that Mac York game, and that early on when you opt to not go for the field goal, and the next one's blocked. And then the nature of the game being so close and right down to the wire. There's a decision by Coach Sharir early on when you're very much in Ben Lane's field goal range, that they opt to go for on third down. And I think, as I said at the time, and again, this is that whole thing of trying to just be generous and not playing just the results of it, where they bring in Marshall McCray and they go, I don't think it was the full house backfield, but it's that triple option they love doing. And, I think someone might have shot through the line. And so, he frankly makes the right play ultimately in not trying to force the pitch. The pitch would have been the read, but Laurier played it so fast that at the end of the day, it could have been way more disastrous had he tried to force the pitch, right read though it may have been in that situation. Laurier gets the ball back. I think they go down and score on that drive. That's 3 points you leave up on the board, and then tag on the fact that Laurier is able to convert on that one as well. I don't want to play the results on it. I love that idea of just the trust that speaks to your defense, that trust that speaks to Marshall McCray. And again, I don't know if it's 9 times out of 10 I think they convert it, but we saw them convert on that same play a lot last year. Maybe if anything, it just speaks to the fact that these teams, Laurier especially, because Guelph did this to them a bunch in that regular season matchup, have shown that look. So there's just a lot of tape now of McCray running that. So when he comes in, the backfield forms up like they do. Maybe teams are just able to hunker down a little bit. We talked about it a bit, but what thoughts did you have on that moment? Second quarter, early, first half of the game?
I would have liked to have had them take the points, to be honest with you, especially being a 3rd and 4 kind of deal. I think I said 3rd and 3 or less for sure. Have play with that and go forward from that. But 3rd and 4, in my opinion, take the points. And especially in a scenario like this, if you're fighting for field goal positioning rather than getting a touchdown in the dying seconds of that fourth quarter, that's a very different ball game. So obviously, woulda, coulda, shoulda, hindsight's 2020 and all of that stuff. But still, even in the moment, there was some discussions along that between you and I and Matt. And even I can't get out of my head with this. Like, as you look at it on paper and you say, you've got Marshall McCray in that diamond formation. And if everybody's healthy, it should be Isaiah Smith, Donovan Malloy, and Caleb Sargent. Now, a couple of injuries happened there. So it's Isaiah Smith, it's Kanye Nethersall, and one other guy I can't remember off the top of my head. But still very dominant. Thank you. But very dominant and very, very dangerous here. But all I can think of is last year against Queens to do that exact same thing. And there's a fumble that happens. Queens takes over, and that leads to a touchdown and a score here. Same type of deal here. Obviously not a fumble, but it gets stopped. Laurier takes over. You don't get any points. And once again, in that second half, and let me back up by saying, we said this previously, the definition or the way you can tell a great coaching staff is the adjustments that they can make going into halftime. You're down 23-0 going into half, and then you open up and you score 21 unanswered in the third quarter and completely dominate that. And then in the second half, you actually outscore Laurier 28-10 and really showcase that. So a fantastic job by this Guelph coaching staff here. But if you get any points in that first half, suddenly the back end of this and this game is completely different if you have the same kind of level of production here. So once again, I don't want to belabor the point because hindsight's 2020 and all of that, but just would have loved to have seen them come away with some points in that regard.
Most definitely. And we should get to the ending of the game because it was uber exciting. On our way to the end of the game, we had a lot of fun nicknaming our guy and Coach Galloway, Todd Stones Galloway, from just his willingness to sometimes just controvert what probably a lot of people would think to do in his situation with the weapons he has. We saw it last year at times when he went to the run where you'd think like, man, how did he? You would have thought that would have been a passing situation, or that if you were going to run, it would have been into this situation. I wanted to just highlight just another moment, a drive that occurred in the late third, continued in the fourth, that was very fun to see, despite it ending up in a touchdown for Laurier, to my chagrin, which was Galley just coming off of Guelph scoring these 3 consecutive touchdowns unanswered and saying, okay, so we're going to get the ball back. We're still up right now. It's 23-21. How do we want to respond? You know what we're going to do? We're going to go double tight and march the ball slowly and methodically down the field. Now, they broke out of the double tight, I think, when they eventually scored, when they got towards the score zone, the red zone, whatever you want to call it. But that was just a moment where I just like, man, like, I wonder what he was thinking about in that moment. I saw him afterwards. I didn't even get to ask him about that, but of a really cool moment of just being like, okay, we got to kind of change what's going on right now because Guelph offensively is just picking up too much steam, and I think we need to slow things down. Our defense has had to be on the field quite a bit defending Guelph this third quarter. And I thought it was such a brilliant play by him in not only trying to slow down the pace, chew up some clock, give his defense the needed rest they had, albeit Guelph still manages to find the end zone one more time. But an awesome moment. Tom, if you want to, continue off that thought, please do. Otherwise, let's go into the end of this game because an electric ending.
Yeah, just really wanted to make a highlight of. We talked about the Griffin offensive line. This offensive line for Laurier looks really outstanding. Yes, losing Lambert and losing Hamilton, those are big losses here. But with the addition of Tyler Potvin at the field guard spot. And I can't remember off the top of my head the left tackle. I'll have to look that up. My apologies. But seeing an improved Josh Reedfield, seeing a future All-Star in Cody Blackshaw and a potential All-Star in Spencer Walsh as well at that field tackle, I'm really excited for that in this regard because that was another, you got some question marks before you see him in training camp or anything else. It was on that O-line and they answered it pretty outstandingly from that standpoint. And then lastly, to talk about that double tight set, we're thinking about it like, oh, why don't you just add in like an extra interior D lineman to really help stop that? Well, because the tight end on the one side is Ryan Spate. And if you put in another D lineman to try to cover him, he's going to make you have a bad day. And then not only that, because it's Ryan Spate and you have to cover him, you forced Javon Jacobson, instead of being inside the box at that will position, to go outside because he has to worry about the run here, but he's also got outside contain, which then lightens up the inside of the box, and that's where Tayshaun Jackson and Quentin Scott really do their thing. So really outstanding by Stones Galloway in calling that out.
Yeah, an interesting comparison of thinking of Ryan Spate and thinking of Nathan Denkers as a really cool OUA comp there. But nonetheless, going down the home stretch, our guy Dawson Hodge adds in a field goal to make it 33-28. Guelph marches the field, getting the touchdown with 55 seconds left on the clock. It was so exciting for us. You had to take the photo of it, and it was so reminiscent of as we were both sort of having the same moment, same realization at the same time of a year prior, because with Griffin football, friends of Griffin football, and the herd, specifically the kind of O-line alumni, they bring everyone down the field. They do a photo with the current O-line and with Coach McDonald, and the herd alumni award a player of the game. And so we're making our way down to the field to be part of that celebration. When the touchdown occurs, I'm forgetting who got that touchdown. That was a boot. That was a boot second rushing touchdown. And right away we're like, this feels so similar to the At the 55 Bowl last year, where we come down to the sideline thinking this game's all but done. And there's Keegan Hall scoring a touchdown, setting up possibly just with the onside kick away from potentially winning it. Guelph doesn't convert on the onside kick, but they manage to stone Laurier, get the ball back, and do a decent job with one timeout to march the ball down and put themselves in a position for, I guess you'd call it a Hail Mary, but like a just under half the field shot to the end zone, which is obviously not high percentage play for you. But just given the way the game started, given the position they were in late, just again, really impressive performance by Guelph. Obviously, all credit to Laurier in putting themselves up early and then shutting the door late. But it certainly made for some great drama late in that game. And gosh, we would have literally been right there had, I don't know if it was Vardy or Arsenault who went up and just couldn't haul in that pass. But it was great drama nonetheless. It could have only been that much greater, at least for me and the part of you that does love Guelph, had that come to fruition. What an ending that was, Tom, and just as an ending to the whole insanity that was week one. Just you couldn't have picked a better outcome. Well, you could. It would have been Guelph winning, but put that aside.
Yeah, it was a perfect nightcap of a game to encompass all of the excitement and really it be an example of how fantastic week one in the OUA was. And once again, phenomenal to be in Guelph. And I want to say, and we already shouted out the people who are running that and the people that we spoke to a whole lot at Guelph. But the fact that for a home game before students are there, they still sold out the
Yes.
grandstand. That is so friggin' awesome that Guelph was able to do that. Literally talking to people being like, I tried to buy tickets the other day. They were sold out. I don't know what I'm going to be able to do here. I have to find like standing room only or something like that. To have that before students are even on campus, that is a hell of a job by that Griffin front office team.
But also a hell of a job by that Laurier fan base
Yes.
of coming down. We didn't end up spending any time in the Laurier section. We watched the entirety of the game from the pavilion. I mean, it's as good a viewing of the game as you're gonna find. And frankly, I wasn't really in the mood to be around Laurier folks for a lot of that game.
You mean your Guelph Yates Cup sweater and your Yates Cup ring? You didn't want to hang out in the Laurier room? That's so weird.
I know, right? Weird job by me on that one. I think it's worth noting. I don't know if we really talked about it, but Isaiah Smith ends up 8 for 44. Donovan Malloy injured, so he's taking the bulk of the carries on this one. And at times, looking like, oh, there's the Isaiah Smith that we're really excited to see. Including, I think he ran over Jesse Wilkins Flaherty at one point, gave him a really good pop. But also at times, and the individual who's going to remain nameless, who had some thoughts about the Guelph receiving core, also said, yeah, Isaiah looked good when he put his shoulders down, but for a guy his size, he also danced a fair bit. So, again, I'm just going to take the positive spin on that and saying a good offensive day for Guelph on the
Mhm.
whole, anyways, with apparently a lot of room to grow. So, I
Yeah.
ain't too mad about that. Also worth noting, I don't know if we said it, Marcus Tenney wasn't in this game either. So, like, as good as that offensive line is for Guelph, and I think, I mean, they handled La Quintana pretty, I don't want to say with ease. That would be rude to say, but like with a relative level of ease. Tenney's in there as well. It's a different story. Also seeing the Andre Thompson debut game. Holy smokes, Tom. You got to talk about this for a little bit. Like, we have to talk about Andre just seeing his first game, which was so meaningful, and seeing so many folks from the London South community come out to that game. Mike Stenning, who means the world to me, and some of those kids that I got to coach back then. But seeing Andre out there was so special. I know I said a lot of things there, but feel free to pick up on any of it because wow.
Yeah, first and foremost, seeing Andre out there and looking at him being like, oh, he doesn't look like a first year kid. He looks like a third or a fourth year with the size of him. I mean, he finished with 3 total tackles and a half a sack in his debut, which was pretty awesome. And anytime that you're fighting off of an offensive lineman as at the same time grabbing onto a Laurier running back and trying to like swing him to the ground in the backfield, that's signs of a pretty good day. So good job to him for sure in that debut. But I love the fact that you brought up Isaiah Smith as well. Showed signs of that the true running back that he is, and it really confirmed to us. I think last year he was still dealing with something of that injury. He wasn't 100% healed as of yet. For a lot of people who know and who've had those knee issues, it can take you up to a year and a half to really get back to where you were. And to see flashes of that, I mean, Isaiah friggin' hurdled somebody. So if that showcases anything there, then yeah, he's 100%. But even it's funny because when you have so many different ways that you can be effective here, like I think a lot of the dancing, he might have been trying to hurdle somebody again because he was like, oh, that was really cool, or maybe he was just trying to like find a gap, find a crease because he is fast. But at the end of the day, you got to recognize that your ultimate trump card is being able to bring the boom against somebody who's trying to take you down. So I know that as he continues to get going, get more reps, get more touches in the games, he's going to get back to form to where he was and truly be that outstanding running back that I know he can be.
And getting Donovan Malloy back will only help him out that much more. Guelph, as we've mentioned, is hitting the road for the Sunday night showcase, taking on the Western Mustangs, 7 p.m. kickoff, August 31st. Laurier is opening up their home campaign against the Windsor Lancers coming off the week 1 bye. Really excited to see how this Windsor team is looking in this season. That is a wrap for us, but not before, as we said, we take it to the mailbag. As always, thank you so much for your comments, questions, feedback of any kind. And we got a few of sort of each category coming in via Reddit. So we'll start with the first comment. Well, 2 comments and a question coming from, well, I think all these names are just randomly generated people joining on Reddit. So I guess I'm not, whatever. Careless Act 7194. Hey, shout out to you, our friend. You've been very active on this side of things. but I'm guessing that's just a random name. 2 comments and a few questions. First comment is Laurier brought back their white helmets and old jerseys, which I thought was very strange. I don't know what was up with that, but I missed the names on the back. Second comment is that OUAtv showing zero investment of my money is such a joke and very disappointing. My question is, do you feel a team should be more worried than Carleton? Like the Blues will not have another game like that, right? Was it more of a loss for Carleton or Toronto win in your mind? I don't really have much to say on the comments as far as, we already talked about the OUAtv piece of it. Yep. Jersey talk really is a Dakota Vine side of things as well. I don't know if you have feedback about that one, but I think really it's a great question to ask. And as most things, it's usually a little bit of both. But if we were going to be one-sided, more of a Toronto win or Carleton loss to try to do justice to our friend giving us the question.
I don't love those kind of questions because you completely diminish one side of it, whatever. But I have to say it's a Carleton loss. I mean, the way that those guys didn't show up and they didn't perform it, like it seemed like a certain side of that, they were just going to walk onto the field and we're going to take things on and this is going to be an easy dub or whatever. And then Toronto just shocked you and got you right back down to reality of, no, you got to bring your very best on every single game because anybody in the OUA can beat you here. But I'll have to say a Carleton loss.
And I'll join you on that. Yes, it's unfortunate and like kind of going back to that conversation we had about that game, trying to be like, let's just be positive about the great things U of T did to take advantage of those things. But golly, it's in the past. I mean, another comment we had was just Carleton, ... Boy, we are in for a rough year again. To our Carleton faithful, hey, we love y'all out there. Stay true to this team, right? There will be positive days ahead. Just wasn't on this day. Last question we got, and I love this question. I think this gets to the heart of some of the things we've talked about with these week 1 matchups, the students not being in the house, coming from Fast Secretary 7406. Again, I'm assuming just a random name, but shout out to you. If the Queens Western and Laurier Guelph games were played 3 weeks later with packed houses of partisan students going wild, do you think either or both results might have been different? As you alluded to, Tom, students or no students, that Guelph the Guelph fans came out. That stadium was filled. Obviously, Richardson Stadium, much bigger stadium, so it sometimes stands out when it's not as filled in. But to this question, what's your take?
So I think it's really interesting because when you look at the teams that won here, in my opinion, at least, I think playing them later on, you'd really only benefit the teams that already had won these games, being both Western and in Laurier in this one. Western, because in that first half, you saw how disjointed some of that offensive play looked like, and the ball's not going to the receivers. If that's a few weeks later into the season, that chemistry is right back and they're completing those. And Queens look pretty sharp for the most part going into that. So I think that benefits Western a little bit more than it does Queens. And in that same vein with Laurier and Guelph, if there's one player that would benefit more from having more experience and more playing time, it's Callum Wither.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit more used to that Laurier offense and those receivers and getting game time experience in that one would only benefit him versus those outstanding players for Guelph have already had a lot of experience going in there. And sure, maybe you're shaking some of the rust off, but I think it would only benefit there. So in my opinion, I think it would only benefit the teams that already turned out the wins.
Which is so fascinating because that's kind of speaking against the nature of the packed houses and the advantage that has. I mean, you know it as a player when that hill is filled up at Guelph, just the impact, just that can have, just the noise and everything like that. I've obviously spoken just, glowingly over the years of how tough it is going into a Rock and Ron Joyce, as an opposing player. Yeah, I mean, you could say Guelph gets Donovan Molloy back, but then you say, well, Laurier, maybe they get Marcus Tenney back in the middle, and you go back and forth on that. And love the question. Yeah, I'll ultimately say at the end of the day, like, would it have made a difference? By virtue of that alone, it's hard to say. But these teams are so well matched up that, we've kind of have used this sort of framework a few times here. You replay these games a couple times, and there's some where Western and Laurier still come out on top and probably by bigger scores. There's a lot of those where Guelph and Queens end up victorious. Yeah, and the fans make an impact on that one. Thank you so much, though, for your questions and comments. Keep sending them our way, whether it's on Reddit, on Twitter, X, DMs, whatever you got for us. We're here to keep this conversation going and to bring you the best coverage that we can of the conference that we all know and love. Tom, fantastic job by you. As always, final thoughts on an outrageous week 1 in the OUA.
What an incredible week 1. If nothing else, this just goes to prove that the OUA is the best damn conference top to bottom that we have in Canada here. Fantastic hanging out with you for so long, and we are so freaking back, my man. It is awesome.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Some outstanding football in the RSEQ and in the AUS. ELR, go check out that McGill box score, looking to sort of set his pace for a possible Heck Crichton Award winner. But yes, the OUA, what an outstanding week. I can't wait to be there in the stands with you for a couple of these games next week. I can't wait to be breaking down and setting up, I should say, week 2 with you on the pod. And we'll be bringing that to you later on this week right here at the 55.